You're listening to Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Don't run and hide. Don't be afraid. Don't turn away any longer. The truth will set you free. And now, your host, the captain of conspiracy, the prince of paranormal. This ain't your daddy's radio network show. This is Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
All right, here we go. Are you ready? Fade to Black. Thursday, February 20th, 2014. 50 days into the new year. As always, we are live from the JP Motorsports Studio right here in Burbank, California. For KJCR and the Dark Matter Radio Network, I am your host, Jimmy Church. Welcome. You know how I start off every show. I do. Started off with a salute to the proud men and women all around the world fighting the good fight for us. Without them, there is no me, there is no you, there is no us, and you can't hear me right now. Think about it. Let's get this show cracking. We got a good one tonight. Woo! Happy birthday to Gloria Vanderbilt. I think she's the mother of Anderson Cooper. She's 90 years old. Kind of funny, but that's the way I think people look at her these days, if that's her. Our dead guy birthday today is, that's right, Kurt Cobain, born in 1967. I think he would have been like 46, 47 years old today. I met Kurt once, briefly, up in Seattle. Had a couple drinks at the bar. An empty bar, by the way. Pretty cool guy. Was. Changed us all, though, our generation. As always, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, everything is Fade to Black. Follow us at JChurchRadio. Subscribe. Go to the fan page over on Facebook. It's jimmychurchradio.com. Go and like or friend or whatever you do there. Get it done. If you're at artbell.com right now, that means you're on the Fade to Black page. Simple to do. The links are right there. They're looking at you. Go click on them. Tonight we've got a very special show. Bill and Nancy Birnes will be with us shortly. And we're going to have the both of them on at the same time. And it should be colorful, insightful, and it's the reason why you are here. You might learn something. You can email throughout the show. I was talking to Bill and Nancy earlier, and they were like, hey, man, you going to get emails, some questions? I said, we always do. You know this show, the best email gets through to me. I will read it on the air if it's good. If it's really good, I'll write back. The bumper music tonight, as always, is Doug Aldrich. Doug's birthday was yesterday. Happy birthday, Doug. Belated. I got a couple things that I want to jump into and point out really quick before we bring on Bill and Nancy. We posted a new viewer. And I'm serious. The viewer is the reason you own the internet. Well, and this show. It's over on the contacts page. If you go over to jimmychurchradio.com and go over to the contacts page, click on that, scroll down. In the middle, you're going to see a picture of Nazca. That's right, the Nazca Plains in Peru. That is a virtual viewer, 3D, of the Nazca lines. You pick your helicopter and you fly around in high def. You know, you've probably seen the Nazca lines for years, those same old photographs over and over again. The Van Daniken pictures and ancient aliens and all of that stuff. This, you get to control yourself because you've always wondered, hey, what if you looked at it from this angle? What about this? What about... You can do all of that in high def with this viewer. I am serious. It is the reason to own the internet. Go over to the contacts page right now, jimmychurchradio.com. Scroll down, click on it, pick a helicopter. You've got your choices. And go and fly around Nazca and check out the way that those aliens wanted it to really look and feel as you cruised around and picked a landing spot. Go do it yourself. It's amazing. And it's high def and it's in color and it's cool. All right. Social forums are blowing up, by the way. I really appreciate everybody jumping in there and getting it started. We started with nothing. Go over to the forums now and check that out. Very, very cool. And after the show tonight, I will jump over to the forums, hang out, and see what everybody has to say. And if I talked a little bit last night about Daniel Keplinger, and at the end of the show tonight, after Bill and Nancy, if we have the time, I have the feeling we're going to go a full 3 hours with them. I hope that we do. And if we have some time at the end of the show, I'm going to tell a Daniel Keplinger story, King Gimp. And a couple of comments really quick about last night's show. Last night, got a lot of email. I did. It's still coming in about our guest last night. And what our guest last night was Ann Druffel. And Ann is 88, 89, 90 years old. I meant to check that today officially, but, you know, she is a woman that commands our respect. And if you jumped into the show last night live and you missed the intro on the show and you didn't bother to go to the website or check out who the guest was, then you didn't know. Okay? Who you were listening to last night is the reason why this show is on the air. That's who that was. As far as I'm concerned, it could have been Queen Elizabeth. That's who was on the show last night. Ann Druffel. And, you know, she just doesn't do interviews anymore. She doesn't have to. But she is very, very important to not only this show, but what we are all concerned about. She is one of the original ufologist researchers, period. And she is in possession of the Rex Heflin photographs. By all accounts, probably the most important photographic evidence that we have of alien visitation to this date. That's who that was on this show last night. It wasn't some old woman. And I don't take offense to comments. It's just that, you know, everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but don't go and say stuff like that unless you know what you're criticizing. Because that wasn't some old woman. That was Ann Druffel. And she gets respect from this show. And I'll tell you what, last night, Ann's gas man showed up. The gas guy shows up to turn off her gas at her house because there was a gas leak, not because she didn't pay her bill or whatever. It happened at her neighbor's house. But he shows up to turn off her gas, and I got to listen. We all did live. That was brilliant radio. And in my opinion, I could have just sat there and listened to that conversation between her and her gas man, because 5 years from now, we can all go back and listen to this show or that show from last night and just appreciate it for how great it really was. And I'm sorry your phone got cut off at the 2 hour mark last night, and we had to move on. But she did immediately contact me and say, Jimmy, I'm sorry about that. I would like to just come on and apologize and maybe talk a little bit more if that's okay. It was such an honor to have her on, and then and she is such a lady, such a woman, that she comes back to me like that. It was just incredible. And that's what that show was last night. Absolutely insane. Okay. All right. Before I bring on Bill and Nancy, there was an article today that I've got to comment on that went out on the web. And on the front page of Reddit, and as we know, Reddit is the front page of the internet. On February 14th, a Foreign Service officer, an FSO, got on Reddit and said, you can AMA. That means you can ask me almost anything. Okay, they had posted a picture of their passport, the diplomatic passport. Now, why is this cool, or why is this, Jimmy, where are you going with this? Well, think about this for a second. It's a diplomatic passport, and there's a little note, like a Post-it, right there, and there's a date. It's photographed in front of the Wall Street Journal's website, so it's in front of a monitor to show you that it is current. And it says, hello, I'm an FSO here, AMAA. Ask me almost anything. So Reddit ran with this. And there's been 3,500 questions so far posted at this Foreign Service diplomat. And now, some of these questions are pretty crazy. And he answers, I'm assuming it's a he. He answers everything pretty candidly. Some of it funny. Some of the questions are off the wall. Some of them aren't. Have you ever used your diplomatic immunity and so forth? But down at the bottom, or one of the last questions that was on Reddit was this. Check out this gem. Reddit user question. Ever had to deal with a crashed UFO in whatever country you were working in? FSO answer. No. The UFO landed safely. Go to Reddit. Check out some of these questions. And for somebody to break rank, as far as I know, and I'm being serious about this, as far as I know, it's never been done before. Think about that. Just go and check it out. Absolutely amazing stuff. This is Fade to Black. I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, we will have with us Bill and Nancy Birnes live right here. The two of them. Fade to Black. KJCR on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Shoot me your email. Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com. Follow us on Twitter at jchurchradio. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. I'll be back in a second. Stay with us, everybody. Don't touch that mouse.
You're listening to Jimmy Church, Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
What's up, revolutionaries? It's me, Jimmy Church. Do you have an IRS or state tax issue? Well, I did, and I called national tax experts. My problems were fixed, done, fini, and man, I got to tell you, it was a relief. National Tax Experts are a recognized tax office that services clients in all 50 states. It doesn't matter where you live. Give them a call. I'm telling you, they take the time to understand each and every client's individual financial status as well as their financial goals. And that's exactly what you need, my brother, when you're taking on the evil three-letter. So, seriously, give them a call today at 1-877-909-5444. Again, 1-877-909-5444, or go check out their website, www.nattaxexperts.com. That's NATTAXEXPERTS.com. Tell them Jimmy sent you.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com
on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Oh, yeah. Welcome. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, KJCR, on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Shoot us an email right now to jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. Follow us on Twitter @jchurchradio. Go friend us on Facebook. Don't forget about YouTube. All of the shows are there. We'll get podcasting going shortly. Trust me. Let's get this show cracking, everybody. It's going to be a great one. Bill Birnes was the consulting producer and lead host of UFO Hunters. Bill's first career was academic, earning a PhD and a law degree. He taught linguistics, I didn't, at Trenton State College for more years than he cares to remember. And then in 1983, Nancy and Bill started their book production company, Shadow Lawn Press. They produced, edited, and written over 30 books on topics ranging from computer languages to serial killers and cookbooks. Nancy Birnes has been a reporter since the 11th grade in high school, which was 1964. Think about that for a second. She has won awards for writing, including the Samuel Shellabarger Award for creative writing when she graduated from Princeton, summa cum laude, in 1979. A listener with a conspiratorial bent might find something wrong with those two sets of numbers, and they'd be right. Together, they produce and host their own show on the Dark Matter Radio Network called Future Theater. I would like to welcome to the program right now Bill and Nancy Birnes. Are you two with us?
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Welcome, you two.
Can you hear me?
I can hear. Everybody can hear you. Bill, are you there? Bill?
Yes.
Okay. Welcome to the show. And, you guys are familiar with the format here, and I just say to everybody, and we'll just start like I always do, which is this is just a conversation. We're hanging out in my living room. Let's see where it goes. I've got no questions. I wish you guys could be here in the studio. I don't know why we didn't just have you guys come into the studio. We're neighbors. But
no, we're not. We're not. We used to be.
Where are you?
We're in Burbank.
Coast.
We're in Burbank. I thought you guys were down the street.
We used to be.
Oh, okay.
We used to be. We used to live on a boat in the marina.
Oh, that's right. And, okay, well, again, my point was that you could see here in the studio that, I have literally no notes on you guys. And I don't
That's as it should be. Because this is an intuitive's dream. We're just going to intuit everything.
Well, and let's just see where it goes. And I think it's going to be great. And
I wanted to thank you for what you just said about last night's show with Andruffel, because steam was coming out of my ears. I think the Bell Gab folks are very, very smart, but boy, they missed the boat.
Right. Yeah. Well, and the thing is about Bell Gab, I'm scared of Bell Gab. That's
me too.
Bell Gab is that's a harsh, dark underbelly right there. And
well, when you say when you say forum, therefore you don't mean Bell Gab. What forum do you mean?
We have forums on jimmychurchradio.com.
I couldn't find it.
Oh,
I looked.
Well, it's spelled FORUM.
A really unique spelling.
Yes.
No. It's at the top, right?
Yep,
it's a link at the top,
yeah,
right?
It's right there, right in the middle.
The link is not working for me.
Oh.
I click on it, it goes nowhere. Mentioning.
Okay, I actually had a Mac user mention that to me earlier today. And that form on a Mac is going to a blank page. So
no. It's because we on the Mac side have been able to turn off Flash in Safari.
Right.
And I'm looking at you in Safari, and so I'm not even getting the option on my chat page on Future Theater. You have to click on it. It's a blank white square until you click on it.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
But I'm not even able to. So maybe if I came in with Chrome or Firefox, I might have a better chance.
Well, again, I did hear about that earlier today. We have both Mac and PC here, and we test everything all the time, and we haven't had any issues until today with the Nazca viewer, and which is on another page. So we're working on that.
Couldn't get to that either. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah. So we're working on that as we speak. Thank you, Nancy.
Well, Jimmy.
Yes, sir.
Well, Jimmy, what did you think, or what do you think after speaking to Ann Druffel, who wrote a fabulous book, Firestorm, about James McDonald?
Yes.
What did you think about the whole James McDonald story?
Well, her take or my take?
Your take.
I
know what Ann's is because she was on UFO Hunters, but I mean,
right,
what was your
right.
take?
My take is I don't use this word often, but genius is what I think about when I think about James McDonald. And so when you look at anybody that walks around with that kind of intelligence, whether you're an artist, a painter, a writer, a physicist, there's always a question of stability there. And so, their brains don't work like mine, if you know what I mean. So, but are you talking about the way that he died?
Well,
No.
I mean,
Or
well,
because okay, well then because I was going to go in another direction there.
well, no, I mean, yes, I'm thinking about the way he died, why he died, and the whole relationship between, I think it's Betsy McDonald and
Yes.
this mysterious person who was in
Right.
who was in her Socialist Party group.
Right.
But the larger issue
Right.
of James McDonald was, on the one hand, he was only, I mean, his presentation about UFOs before the House Science Committee
Right.
was only the second time in history
Yep.
the House ever sat back and listened to a detailed scientific presentation about UFOs.
Right.
But there was this whole conspiracy, and it was a conspiracy surrounding
when was
McDonald's
when was
life.
the first time?
1966 with
Yes.
Jerry Ford.
Yep.
After the Hilldale sightings,
In Michigan.
Jerry Ford wrote to Mendel Rivers on the House Armed Services Committee and said the House really had to consider dealing with or getting information about UFOs.
Well,
and the
he
head of
actually-
Project
I-
Blue
well,
Book,
he-
until it dumped all over him.
Right. And I think he went further than that, though, Bill, in that he demanded,
Right.
and with his position in Michigan, he demanded at that time, this has to be talked about because it's not BS. I want to use another word right there, but and he was convinced of that. So, yeah, he demanded that first hearing in '66. Now, concerning McDonald, I know I have talked to a couple of people that have done the research directly, not only with Ann, but a couple of other people, and she mentioned names last night about this. But anyway, I know that there is some extremely sensitive material that he was exposed to. And that is where I just have a big question mark when somebody like that is walking around with that kind of knowledge and then suddenly passes away that, yeah, I do believe he knew something. I really, really, really
Did
believe
Bill
that.
ever hear about the Black Book?
Oh, his journal, the Black Journal?
Oh,
Yeah.
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 Well, who do you think has that book?
Well, you heard what Ann said last night. Now, I've talked to a couple of people and Ann directly about this, and nobody knows. And that's the funny part is that he references this constantly. And I was trying to get some more information out of Ann about that last night, and
Right.
and I know that she's not going to tell me everything.
Well, she's
but
cagey. She may be 90, but she's cagey.
She's very
and
cagey.
she knows what she wants to keep for, let's say, the next book or something. She also knows what she wants to do more research about.
Right. And she let that be known last night too, as well.
It was an enjoyable conversation, and the Bell Gab people are very excited about Dark Matter Network, and because of your show, and so yeah.
Well,
And and I just wanted to add my praise because I think it was a very admirable interview.
Well,
because she's not an easy woman to interview.
No,
not.
she's not an easy woman to get a hold of. She's very, very, very private now, and understandably so.
Well, do
And,
you have some people that you would love to be able to interview, and you're having a hard time catching?
I've got, well, I kind of mentioned this the other night with Richard Dolan. I've been in communication with Bob Lazar. And
Wow.
and over the last month and a half, and it's right there. And I figured I was going to kind of handle it a couple of different ways. One, I'll just keep our communication completely private. I know that he wants to finally come out and talk. I know that. Otherwise, he would have never responded to me in the first place. And we've had a very cordial exchange. But and I'm waiting. For this.
Did you initiate it?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, and see, this is the thing. Sitting in for somebody like Art, on this network with Keith, has its privileges. Now, I understand who I am. I'm a nobody. Okay, forging.
And Jimmy, for my information, how old are you?
I'm 50.
Oh, yay!
Yeah, I just turned 50.
You've reached at least one plateau of maturity.
I don't feel it, but so I'm 50, and so I have been able to reach out, and the people that I have had on this show, the guests on this show, I would have never, if it wasn't for Art and Keith and this network, they would have never spoken to me. And that goes also to Bob Lazar. He would have never responded back to me unless it was Keith, Art, artbell.com, and Dark Matter. Otherwise, you understand what I'm saying? So, and so that he's one guy. Actually, there's a couple. I would love to talk to a couple of those hoaxers out there that stroked Art over the years.
Which ones?
David Lewis Anderson. I would love to get him on this show.
That one I don't remember.
He's a time travel scientist guy that had some pretty fantastic claims. And
what about John Titor? There's a guest.
Well, yeah, no, John Titor has been a subject of this show constantly. I've had on the show Larry Haber and Oliver Williams.
Okay,
right,
well,
Oliver Williams.
I've just discovered your show, so I beg your pardon.
Now,
but,
and that was,
and by the way, where can you can we get, are your old shows on the net now?
Yes, everything's on YouTube. Yep.
Okay, good. I will become a scholar.
And so
scholar, yeah.
Well, the thing is, and you bring up a good point. Just like Oliver Williams and John Haber, the John Titor stuff, the week before, there are certain things that constantly live as far as subject matter goes, perpetually on the web, and they constantly feed on themselves. There's
the time cube.
It is. It's exactly that. And so I reached out to Larry Haber, and I didn't think, he's the attorney for the John Titor family and foundation.
Right.
And I happened to literally get a hold of a phone number, call it, and he picked up. Now, that's how I secured him for the show. And he said, yeah, you know what, Jimmy? Absolutely. Let's do this. Okay. So, I
think I've heard that show because I remember that story that you kind of cold called him and he picked up.
Completely cold.
Doesn't a part of you really believe that story?
100%.
Sort of like Mel's Hole, but I really do believe it partially.
Mel's Hole. There's a good one.
I love Mel's Hole.
I've probably listened to that show 20 times.
The belt buckle. Did you? There's been more than one show.
Yeah, there's one, but the original show, the first one when Mel called in the first time, pop a couple of bags of popcorn, kick back, and just let that thing rip. It's a great show.
There was one about a belt buckle that I think belt buckles when they got to, I don't remember, but they were reversed. They had money in it from another dimension or something.
Yeah, and that was and again about Mel's Hole. That first show is when he first called in, and I've got this hole, I don't know what's going on with it, and Art, it went through I don't know, probably 20 commercial breaks and kept coming back to Mel. And so the fascination of that first show with Art's discovery of it and Art's mind and the way it worked was just absolutely riveting live radio.
Do you remember when it was happening? There was a very primitive Google Earth back then. It wasn't a very well-equipped Google Earth. You could kind of poke around. And do you remember going up to the spot it was supposed to be and it was all blacked out?
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so there were some things about it that honestly, I'm just going to say this. I could talk for the next 2 hours about Mel's Hole. Okay, so you struck a chord with me. We need to swing off this subject because I will talk about.
Come on our show.
I would love to talk about Mel's Hole, and I would love. I would be honored to come on your show. So. Okay. Well, anyway, we were talking about John Titor. So this is the thing,
right?
I get Larry on the show, and I had others. Oh well, no. Let me back up a step. 1 week prior to the Larry Haber show, Oliver Williams, I just went on a probably 90-minute John Titor cleansing of the soul diatribe by myself. I didn't take any calls. I just talked. And how I felt about John Titor, because I was one of the guys that, and gals, back in the day that was reading all of those forums. I was there.
Yeah,
and
me too.
It was something. Yeah, it blew my mind, and it wasn't so much. And this is what I talked about to Larry a week later. It wasn't so much for me the subject, because that was fascinating on its own. But it was the evidence that was presented with it, the photographs.
I know.
And
it was the PC.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. So that show goes out, and I got so much email about the John Titor thing. Oh, man, somebody out there's talking about Titor. Thank goodness. And I got all this email, and I just thought, well, you know what? I'm going to do a Titor show. But I can't do it without... I needed Darby. I wanted Darby from Time Travel Institute. I still haven't been able to chase him down. And Darby, if you're listening, please contact us. But I did that blind call to Larry Haber, and he literally picked up I couldn't believe it, actually. Hi, this is Larry. And I was like, blah, 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 blah,
Well, where do things stand right now? Because since you might have been the last person to talk to Larry on the air, I think.
Yes, and Oliver Williams, too. Well, how it stands right now, I've gotten a bunch of email and correspondence from different people around the world about John Titor. And I've got a couple of journalists that I'm talking to as well right now that unrelated to the Titor story got involved in the Titor story. I really can't.
Oh, okay. Wow.
I can't really
That's
go.
That's complicated.
Yeah, I can't really go further with that until all of us put the pieces of the puzzle together. Is it relevant or not? I don't know yet. But what Larry did say on the air was that John Titor was coming back in 2014. And
yay!
Yeah,
just in time for Art Bell.
So hopefully, yeah, right.
Actually, the only show he'll be on is Art Bell's show, and he'll say, "I'm going to be on the Art Bell show," and people wouldn't believe it. And sure enough, it all comes to be, because Art Bell has left the airwaves, he's come back, he's left, and now John Titor. That would be so cool.
Well, you know what? It would force Art's hand. He would have to come back. Art, Titor's going to be on my show unless you come back to the...
Right, and then he'll be on our show, and as he goes down the rungs...
Yeah, right.
He loses... Well, let me just throw out a little reason why I'm asking, and I think it's okay with Bill if I say this.
Sure.
No, it's not. I totally can't talk about it.
Okay, done.
That is not right, Nancy. That is just a big bowl of wrong.
I know. The question that I wanted to ask is, how many time travelers have crossed your path
on this show?
No,
just in general. I mean, yes, on the show, but also time travelers who've been self-identified as time travelers. Obviously, you wouldn't know. Somebody says, "I'm a time traveler."
The answer is yes. The answer is none. Okay, the answer is none. Now, before this show, after the John Titor, I've had probably a half a dozen people contact me that said that they were time travelers. And
go ahead. I'm sorry.
And one of them specifically that I had back on the show that met John Titor in Las Vegas in 2000 at a chess tournament, and went to John Titor's hotel room, where Titor had his time travel box in the hotel room.
Oh, come on.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And tried to get it activated, and it wouldn't work, and the guy got out of the room before anything happened. Yeah, so and the Titor story is that fascinating to everybody. It draws people in. And just like me, just like you, just like Bill, it's a story that just won't go away. And I can tell you why right now. It ain't been solved.
Right.
Nobody's been busted.
Well, there's been a lot of things that haven't happened. And yet, on the other hand, we all think, you and I and Bill, and I think everybody listening at this point, that there are alternative futures, that the future he came back to is probably not the future his people created when you think about it.
Well, and that's
in other words,
but that's the out to the story. That's your out, Nancy. If you think about that, all of his predictions didn't come true. Well, they didn't because it wasn't in our timeline. It happened in another timeline.
Yeah, but he would be an expert on that kind of information. He would not come back and say that the United States had a civil war in 20 whatever, et cetera. He would know about timelines if they really existed, alternate universes and stuff. He would know about that.
But he talked about that very, very, very specifically in his timeline that he grew up in, where everything happened. Yes, that's what happened to the United States. But you can't travel back. You can't.
Why does he come back?
You're in another timeline when you come back.
Yeah, but why did he come back to our timeline to get that particular device?
Because in the future, and this is well documented. This is not conjecture. Okay, this is actual fact, and this is one of the things. This is one of the points in his story that really causes you to pause and raise an eyebrow. And it is this: the software that ran on those specific computers back then on the mainframe computers, the old reel-to-reel, tape drive mainframes, that computer language was able to communicate with that small desktop computer that he came back to get. And it was the only computer that did. Okay? Now, in a remote sense, you could literally hardwire it to the mainframe and modify the software. The software on the mainframes had a problem, and that problem breaks down in the year 2036. Okay? So in 2036, they are getting ready to or 2036, they're getting ready to have this catastrophe on their computer system. So he had to come back and get this small computer and go back to 20. And that's fact. That's that.
And that's how hoarders are created, because I'm looking at my old Macintosh from 1984, which is sitting on a shelf right here, and I'm thinking, should I get rid of it or keep it? And you think, wow, what if it's the one machine that will solve the world crisis in the future?
Well, there's that, but there's that part of it. But if I just spilled a little coffee, okay, I'm back before I blow up the entire.
One other thing,
yes.
I at various points in my computer careers have changed all my medium from A to B. And have you ever tried to get an optical disc, which was the coolest, hottest thing at a certain point? You'd have to kind of stand in front of it like Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope. Nothing will come out of the optical disc because that technology is just gone.
Yeah. So
we're doing anyway. Yeah.
Well, back to Titor. The reason why this thing keeps feeding on itself is because nobody's been busted. And when you look at, and I've driven this home so many times, and if you think about this on a technical level, now both of you are educated, so when you look at a technical manual that somebody has written it, and somewhere it was printed, and somewhere there's a typesetting that was involved. You guys were in the magazine industry, all about typesetting and what it takes to set type on a page. Or how about get illustrations drawn for those said pages? That means there was an artist involved, a graphic designer that was separate from whoever's setting your type, and so forth. But
what's your point?
My point is that the manuals that he has brought forth and they brought on, nobody has busted anybody for being the artist that drew those pictures. Or
oh, really?
Yeah,
no.
no.
Yeah, I don't know.
And
Okay,
until
so I don't know the crucial stuff about the
that's
story,
the
therefore.
those are the crucial points. And
Yeah, where are the manuals that we can all look at?
well, they're all over the web.
Okay.
I will email you some stuff after the
I
show.
will
and
start.
you
I
can
will
check it
start
out.
on that because Bill and we did a computer encyclopedia, for God's sake, for McGraw-Hill.
I have a couple of people right now that are talking to a couple of engineers that work for a couple of large companies that are literally going through all of their technical manuals just to see if they could find
Cool.
something that was similar, and with all of the knowledge that is out there. When I say knowledge,
Yeah.
it's not so much the internet because that's part of it, but I'm talking about human beings, all the knowledge that is out there. Somebody somewhere knows something about this. And if there isn't somebody out there, then it's a true story. And that's my point. Nobody has been busted. You remember, let me bring you up, I'll bring up a point. Gulf Breeze. Okay? Now, when we talk about Gulf Breeze, those are amazing photographs, weren't they? Bill, were they just as intriguing as it gets, right? Okay, and then and what was his name that owned the house that took the pictures?
Walters.
Ed Walters.
Ed Walters. So he sells his house and moves out. The new tenants move in. What do they find in the attic? A model.
It was all a setup.
No, they didn't find it. They didn't find it.
But
what happened?
But Bill, but hold on. Let's not. That's not directly my point. My point is somebody found something. That's all. And in Titor's,
no, but it was but that was a fake. It was a made up thing that they found.
See, what happened was after Ed
But
Walters
wait.
sold the house.
So therefore, Jimmy, this is good news for you because therefore, even if somebody disputed the Titor stuff, it could be the same thing as the Gulf Breeze. It could be that because nobody's disputed it, it could mean that it's not true.
Well,
in other words,
yes, but that's exactly my point, Nancy and Bill. Hear me out on this for a second. What I was saying is everything that was in those photographs, that time machine box with all the military designations on it, and the cutaway drawings of it, and those photographs, that box, which was 4 feet long, 2 feet high, 2 feet deep, size of a foot locker, has never been found. And if somebody built it and photographed it, whether it was in 2036 or whether it was in 1999, somebody built it. And if it was built in 1999, nobody has said, like maybe an ex-girlfriend. How about an ex-girlfriend comes forward? You know what? My ex-boyfriend, Bob, built that box and he left it in my house when he moved out. And here it is.
You could make your little fortune that way.
But it's nobody's been busted like that. And there must be, if it's a hoax, dozens of people involved, and nobody has been busted.
Well, I think once the some of the major predictions didn't come true, I think people sort of lost interest and said, "Well, that was wrong."
Yeah,
right? And that's I think that's why I kind of wandered off. And started reading.
But that's only if you took it as at face value. If you read deeply into all of the posts, and of which there, I don't know if there's thousands, but there might be. If you read through all of that, the out was the entire timeline issue. So therefore, whether the Olympics happened or not, which is one of the predictions, or whether the Civil War happened or not, it's not in our timeline. It's not the one that we are living in now. He's just saying.
Yeah, and I thought that was such a cop-out that I kind of thought,
Well, and then when you take it, the entire Titor story in its totality, the photographic evidence and the fact that nobody's been busted and the timeline issue and the computer issue and if you take it all in its totality, there's nothing to pick apart. It all fits together. Now, is it a screenplay? Yeah. Is there a lot of smart people?
Great book, Jimmy. You should put together.
To write the book.
Oh man, and I don't know how, I got somehow into the center of this. That's what I started to talk about, mention earlier. So then I get Larry Habers on the phone, and he hangs up, and I take a commercial break, and during the commercial break, I see one of my phone lines go off. I thought, okay, I'll come out of the commercial break and grab this call. Hi, you're live on the air. Hi, Jimmy. This is Oliver. Oliver Williams? Yeah, man. Listen, a friend of mine's listening to your show. Back to my point. Because this is, artbell.com, the Dark Matter Radio Network, people listen to this show. And you never know who is listening. You just don't. So Oliver had a friend listening to the show saying, Jimmy Church is talking to Larry Haber.
But other freaky things are happening to you right now in conjunction with your show, like the stuff in Bell Gab. You ran into somebody remembered you from the past.
That was pretty trippy. Yeah. He called in last night.
Yeah, and I didn't hear the Andruffle parts you talked about. I hung up before all that happened. Before the gas man came and all that. So it just strikes me that you there's a thing called Beshert if you're Jewish. Beshert if you're Jewish. And it means that it's an acceptance that sometimes when, for various reasons in your life, everything seems to speed up or everything seems to go right or everything seems to fall into place.
It's things connect that you wouldn't think would connect because there's some kind of larger presence in the universe that puts these things together.
And you can't control it.
Right. Exactly.
And sometimes certain kinds of people that you talk to kind of create almost like there's a Kurt Vonnegut phrase. There's kind of I think it's called a caress. You create your own little caress of people, and it creates power, and things can get done when the right people come together. And Bill and I, just as a quick aside, because people hate these asides, but it's the truth. If we were in your living room, this is where we'd go. When we first came out to California, we felt lonely and went to open houses every Sunday because you could go into people's houses and you could sort of see if you ever wanted to buy or move there, but you inevitably learned how to read the newspapers carefully, and you would go to the interesting houses and you would go into movie stars' houses and stuff like that. But every once in a while you'd go into somebody's house and you'd sit and talk to them or start talking to them, and you could feel this reality distortion field that they say about Steve Jobs. You just felt like you could do something. You could have a house like that. You could have a life that was exciting because Right. It seems like you're entering one of these kind of phases or something. Do you feel that?
Well, I will say, and that's an interesting point. I will say this, that I knew from a very young age that what we are doing right now, at this very moment, in the now, not a John Titor now, in the now, right now, that I would be doing this someday. And
me too. That's the weird thing, because I'm not at all. You trained at least.
Well,
Bill's from a showbiz family, but I'm the opposite. I'm quiet during the day.
Well, I fought it. And I wanted to be a rock star, and I went through that phase, and I produced a bunch of bands and had a really good run there and stuff. But I was always told, and I had a friend of mine growing up over in Pasadena. His name is John Couton, and his dad ran the broadcast program, radio program for Pasadena City College. His name is Stan Couton, great guy. And I had this voice that I have right now, I had when I was like 2. So, I could not, it was one of those things. I wanted the voice.
You were like that little Stewie.
Yeah. I wanted the voice that my friends had, the high pitched voice or whatever, I had this voice and so I had always heard, you should do something with that. Well, I wanted to be a guitar player. My voice didn't matter. But Stan Couton, when I was probably 21 years old, said, Jimmy, you've got to come, your personality, get over here, and I'll connect that brain of yours to that mouth of yours. Get into this radio program over here. You'd be great. And I was like, no. I fought it. And then, 7-8 years ago, I kind of retired from the radio business. And I got out of the music business.
What did you do?
I was a producer. I produced bands. And so I just kind of retired and unwound down from that. And my wife said, you should go to school. You've always wanted to do this, and I thought, okay, so that's but now let's back up one more step. I had listened to Art Bell and AM radio since as long as I can remember, and I always knew when I would listen to Art and shows like that, Art specifically, but shows like Art too as well. I couldn't get enough of it. That I wanted to do just that. And so I prepared myself mentally for years and years and years for this moment when I was, in sportscasting, it's a different situation, but I was able to get my yayas out, okay, in doing that and being on the air. But when this situation came up with dark matter and Keith and I started talking about it, I knew at that point what my show was going to be. I knew what I wanted to do and how I wanted to move forward. As long as Art was going to, his presence not being here was going to allow me to fill that void, then I should be able to produce a show that everybody would find interesting. And that was it. So for me, it was effortless because it was something that I just wanted to do for a long, long time. Now, back to your point, Nancy. Because of that, I think, and Bill's point too, it was the right thing at the right time for everybody, for myself, for the listeners to this show, for dark matter. Everything was synchronistic, and I hate to use that word, but it all happened at to the day practically. And Keith will probably tell you the same thing.
Exactly, when we ended up on the Dark Matter Radio Network, we ended up in a very funny way. And we're here at the courtesy of our producer, Angel Espino from PSN Network.
Right.
And he has Skywatchers on Tuesday nights. And in fact, Skywatchers is moving to, I believe, 1 o'clock, which is going to be a great time frame because, as you know, the numbers go up as the night goes on. But what happened was it was a series of, I stay up all night. I just always do. I take a nap and then I stay up all night. It was a series of 3 nights. Bill would go to bed, and each morning the world had changed again. And I would say, we're going to be on a different network and stuff and so forth. And it was all happening in 3 separate nights very, very quickly. And it felt totally natural. And yet it's such a stretch because the only way I've ever thought about being on the radio was you listen to Art Bell and then you think you're in a conversation, and in your head you kind of are talking back to him.
Right.
Conversationalist.
Right.
And so you think to yourself, geez, it's not that you would call in and talk, but you just feel like you carry that conversation on. And I just always felt like I could do that too if I had the chance, I guess.
Well, it's funny. I'm looking at the email coming in. Now there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
She should stop interrupting people.
No. I'm just saying. No, question for Bill and Nancy. Bill and Nancy question. Titor. Yeah. It's crazy. And when we get around to, we'll start to bust through some of these. Now, listen, really quick. I want to. I'm going to change gears a little bit because it's not about me. It's about you two. But I appreciate you. I never have really talked about how this show even started or how I feel about it. But, so thank you. I kind of vented a little bit. But this show is just because I need my art fix. I'm a junkie. I
know.
And the only way I can get that fix is to do this show. And
that's the scary part with the Bell Gab thing, because we have a bond that I feel as strongly about the whole thing as you do, and as strongly as so many of them do. And I want them to like our show and let us stay on the network because I feel like I'm helping the situation by being on the network. So when they say nasty things, it hurts you because eventually you're going to get thrown off the network. I'm just saying.
Look, all of the Bell Gab fans are just like you and I. There's no difference there in that they're as frustrated as we are. And nobody wants Art back as bad as I do. Now, what happened? What if Art comes back tomorrow? Well, we open arms. Of course, it's his. It's his thing. But if he comes back tomorrow, what happens to my show? Hopefully, and Keith and I have talked about it. I don't want to make it.
We're talking about this because we knew we were going to be on, and just in general, I was thinking as a solution to this, and maybe Art's begun to think this very thing. It's sort of like he created a monster. Now he's got competition. Yeah, I'm not speaking about us because we're a weird show, but your show is very similar. Here's the thing. You listeners will have a chance to pick shows by the guests, and they will have a feast of things because Art's going to still have guests on that I don't like, and but I'd still listen. But we would then get a better choice of guests all across the network, and so listeners would have a cornucopia.
Well,
a feast.
Yeah. And part of what, and I totally agree. You need to have choices. And so with a network like Keith has put together, I definitely, and I listen to everybody else's programs. Love Angel, by the way, and After Dark's a great show. You have a great show, and it's just choices, and that's the thing,
Right.
Today.
Oh, and also Swagger. I love Swagger.
Yeah,
Swagger.
great show.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when you think about it, people today, they don't have ABC, NBC, and CBS and a couple of rabbit ears on their television. And I don't think you're old enough, Nancy, to remember the old days. But Bill does.
Yeah, right. Yeah, my mother.
Sure.
And
my
mother,
mother, actually, we had phones,
hold on, Nancy, hold on. Just let me get this point out really quick.
Yeah.
Is this? It's not just television, and it's not just the radio. Now, and it's not just the internet. It is 500 cable stations. It is tens of thousands, if not millions, of internet radio stations. And on top of that, it is cell phones. It is iPads. It is smart televisions. Now your smart television can watch, you've got Roku, and you've got all of these different, now people have choices. And so if they make a choice to come to this network, to come to Dark Matter, because they can go and listen to anything else. I am so thankful for that.
You're never going to get this on the mainstream, on all those 500 channels on the cable, ever.
Oh, yeah, you can do it right now. What are you talking
No,
about?
You're never going to get a show like this.
No, this show is on. Think about what I just said, Nancy. Roku right now is there are people listening to this show right now looking at a 42-inch television.
So you got yourself on Roku. We're on Roku also, but we never even go there.
But
I use Roku for other stuff.
No, people do it, and they have that choice. So, okay, well, anyway, let's change gears a little bit. I want everybody out there listening right now. Bill, I'm going to pull you in. Nancy,
shut up.
No. But really quick, Nancy and I worked on this gallery today. And by the way, Bill, you're harder to get on the phone than my mechanic. I'm just going to let you know. Okay, so anyway, go over
We have a cloud issue, by the way. Again, a Mac issue. The cloud has merged our two phones, which is one of the reasons.
Okay.
So
okay. Over at jimmychurchradio.com, everybody just scroll down. We do this with all of our guests, but on the home page, we have a gallery, Bill and Nancy Birnes, down at the bottom of the page. Just scroll down. This is a simple gallery, but it's a great one. There's 8 pictures here. And so I want everybody to follow through these pictures. Bill, can you look at these 8 pictures right now while we're talking?
Well, if you tell me which ones they are, because
I'll tell you each one because Bill's in front of a different setup. The first one, you want to go in order, right?
Yeah, and that I believe the order is
abductee.
Right, that's the first picture, and so let's give everybody a chance here to kind of key in. Go to jimmychurchradio.com, scroll down to the bottom of the home page, everybody, and there is the gallery. The listeners on the show, they already know that there's going to be a gallery there, and we can kind of follow through.
And it's very, very cool. You took a page from Keith. You see? And here's the thing. That one for Bill, so he knows what's talking about, that's the infamous when Bill turns to the guy in the first season and says, you might be an alien hybrid.
I'll never forget it. So,
that's okay. That's that.
Okay, Bill, take us through that moment really quick. So you're standing and you're looking at this guy. What made you utter those words?
When we were filming, this was in Virginia. When we were filming, And this guy's name is Terrell Copeland. Terrell Copeland had been a Marine, and he'd had UFO sightings in the Marine Corps at very highly classified, secure Marine bases. And the Marines threw him out. That was what happened. And so we were talking, and then what happened was he as we were talking, we were, I thought, off camera. And so he began talking about his experiences in the Marine Corps, and finally began saying things like, after he was thrown out of the Marine Corps, he was discharged, he began getting these messages from people about he had to nurture his star seed. So we go over to the side and we start talking. And what we didn't know, because they were filming something else, was that our mics were still on. So when the showrunner, Alan Lagarde, heard the conversation about Terrell's star seed, he directed the camera back to us. And so that was that shot of the camera moving in.
Right.
And so Terrell said, yeah, I mean, I've been getting these instructions to nurture my star seed. We go inside his house, Pat, Terrell, and I, sitting in this is his parents' house, actually. And he begins talking about all these strange occurrences in his life. He tells his parents the phone is going to ring before it rings. He tells his parents who is going to be calling before the phone even rings, and sure enough, it's that person. Then he tells this really odd story. He's in his apartment, and he is lying on his couch. He's taking a nap. And he hears someone fiddling with the doorknob. Gets very nervous. So he reaches for his sidearm. And he reaches for his sidearm, and a voice rings out in his head. Don't touch your gun. You don't need to grab your gun. And he's like freaking out at this point. Who's talking? What's going on here? And the voice says, all I want to do is tell you to nurture your star seed. It is very important for you to nurture your star seed. And he goes to get up from the couch, and he's completely paralyzed. In other words, his mind is working, all his senses are working, but he can't move. Now, yes, if you're a sleep paralysis person, a sleep specialist, you know what hypnagogic states are, right? Where your body is paralyzed, your mind is working.
Right.
Okay. So I will give you the conventional science behind it, but he can't move. The doorknob is still wiggling, and he cannot reach for his gun. He's incredibly paralyzed. Now, the other odd part of the story is that he was discharged from the Marines because he had, and I saw the guy's medical records, he had what was called an undetermined blood disorder. What is that? Anyway,
yeah. Okay.
Finally, the person leaves, his power to move returns, and he's telling us the story, right? And telling us about the fact that when he was born dead. Okay, he was totally cyanotic. He's born dead, right? And his grandmother says to him, "You were born dead, and then you came alive, and you are the devil's child." Well, I mean, imagine you're growing up, and your grandparent tells you you're the devil's child. I mean, that's weird. What are you, Damien? So this is the story he tells, and finally, I'm thinking starseed. This guy's got a mission because his voice is saying you have a mission to explore your starseed. So I threw out the idea you could be an alien hybrid. Well, Pat goes off the wall and says, "What? You're calling this guy an alien hybrid? What are you crazy?" So the funny thing about that is that episode, that segment, hits the editing bay. And the production company had just hired. And at that moment in time, before that episode, History was making a determination. Should we renew this for a second season? Should we let it go? What do you think? So the new network executive is it comes out to California. History Channel is in New York. He comes out to California and he's in the editing bay. The production company had just hired a new story editor, a chief story editor called Stu Chait. And Stu Chait is standing in the editing bay and he's seeing this. And the way this thing was edited was we would shoot something like 25 to 30 hours of video for 45 minutes of airtime.
Wow.
So obviously you are cutting. So the first editor just is going to cut this out, totally cut this out. And so Chait's watching and saying, leave it in. Let's wait till another edit. But for the time being, leave it in. Well, the exec producer from history is standing there and sees that. And on the spot, he says, this show is renewed for a second season. And that was funny how that worked. Ultimately, we took Terrell Copeland and Michael Lee Hill, two people from absolutely different backgrounds. You couldn't get people more different. Terrell Copeland was an African-American Marine,
right,
who was a security guard. Michael Lee Hill was a rocker.
Right,
he was a rocker out in Cleveland. We take them both to Mass General. Ted has a friend there who's a hematologist, and they did a blood screening. They both have the same exact blood disorder, creatine kinase, pouring into their blood. That's why Terrell was medically discharged from the Marine Corps. But two people entirely different have the same exact blood disorder. And at the end of the show, they're basically brothers, Starsheet brothers. And Michael Lee Hills, they've both gone on their separate paths to explore this. And of course, Michael Lee Hill's biological parents, he was an adopted child, his biological parents also had UFO experiences.
So you're saying when they kept referencing to Starseed, it was the two of them, they needed to take care of each other? Is that the connection?
Right. That was the connection.
Wow.
It was really strange.
It is strange. And now Copeland, was he the guy, and just correct me if I'm wrong, because it's been years now, but was he the one that saw the underwater USO? Was that him?
No, that wasn't him. Copeland was the guy who in his apartment, he saw this huge flying triangle.
Oh, that's right.
House,
that's right. Right.
Gets in his car, right? And he's following this thing in his car. And it goes over to it. This is in Suffolk, Virginia. He's following this thing, and he sits there and he watches this huge triangle hover over the shopping center. And then it flies away. The next day, he hears this thwap, 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 thwap. This is in the morning. This thwap, 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 goes to his window, and there is an unmarked black helicopter hovering window level outside his house.
I'm waiting for that here at the studio. It's going to happen here soon. I want to ask you a couple of questions about peel off your memory hat a little bit, and that underwater USO episode where the witness said he was standing on the pier. You remember, and the craft. What that to me. And a lot of your episodes are really great. I'm not going to sit here and stroke you in any way, but although I should. But that witness and the way that he described it, and I think there was two, but that description was one of the best. And how did you feel when he hit you with that? And is there more to the story that maybe didn't get on the show?
No. We that was so riveting to us that we pushed other things aside to keep that in the show, because it really was, it was so detailed,
yes,
so specific.
Yes.
So, those are the kinds of things that we were looking for. And one of the premises of the show was never to say, oh, we're going to prove that UFOs are real. That was never the issue in the show. That wasn't how the show was set up, wasn't how it was designed. It was literally to talk to people who'd had experiences. So the three of us were not as important as the witnesses we spoke to, because we knew that there were real human stories of human encounters out there, and those were the stories that nobody was listening to.
Well,
Everybody was listening to pundits.
Don't you think they had to bring Kevin in the third season to kind of be what they thought was a balanced, skeptical?
Nancy, you took the words out of my mouth right there.
Well, you know what? And I just got a tweet from somebody saying, I will read it verbatim. How long are you going to let my tweet name, Nancy Birnes, interrupt every damn sentence? Turn her off her microphone. Maybe she'll get the hint.
Well,
and I wrote back to this guy saying, but I'm the guest.
Not only are you the guest, but I can't control it.
Okay, so here's the deal.
But hold on, Bill. Okay. Let me get my thought out.
Go ahead.
It's exactly what Nancy said. But did you feel that? And this is me watching the show. This is me speaking to you. Did you start off as the pit bull, from the first episode, or did you kind of develop? You were just so persistent. Did you develop into that, or did you go into? Was the show planned that way for you
No.
to? Okay.
No. What had happened was I was never supposed to be in the show. That's the baseline for this thing. I was never supposed to be in the show. It was supposed to be Pat Oscar. Pat was supposed to be the lead,
right?
With two friends. One friend was a gamer. By gamer, what I mean is he created video games. He was a programmer. He was a game designer.
Okay.
This guy was an absolute skeptic because he knew how you could create illusions on a computer. That was one person.
Okay.
Then the other person was a PhD in biology. Just like Ted was a PhD in physics,
right.
He was a PhD in biology. And his job was to be the baseline, the center. Well, what happened was as we moved from the pilot to the first series, we did an episode on UFO files, the old UFO files on history called USOs. That was the one where we went out into Redondo, to Santa Monica Bay from Redondo Beach. And so and I had done 3 years of UFO files myself, starting back in 2004. Late 2003, early 2004 with this production company. So I'd done that. So I'd been on television for them a lot, for History Channel. But I wasn't supposed to be in the show. It was those three. Well, just as a base for that UFO Files episode, the producer said, Bill, can you just set up the sea voyage, right? Set up the sea voyage, and then come on the boat if you want to. We'll have some fun on the water. Fine.
Okay.
He's on the boat. Then he says, okay, we need somebody to kind of narrate what's going on with these three guys. They were underwater. Preston Dennis was on the boat, and so I began narrating it. When History Channel saw that episode, they said, what we really need is somebody who's actually in the UFO field, somebody who's written books about this in the field. And remember, I'd already produced a show for History, the Day After Roswell documentary. So we need somebody in the field who can basically be the narrator for what's going on from a ufological point of view.
Okay.
That's how I wound up in the show.
Okay.
And the show evolved over 3 seasons. In the first season, it was Pat, Ted, and I who went out together to do everything. And the network said, it's good, but it's limiting. And so toward the end of that first season, we did the Stephenville episode, and that really was all Nancy. That was one of the things that Nancy did. Nancy would be back in the office, really current, because we were on the road office. She was on the boat, following UFO stories. And then in late 2007, that was when the Stephenville story broke. And the Stephenville story, this is one of the aspects of UFO, of ufology. Immediately there was a feeding frenzy and a fight, right? Angela Joyner was covering it for the Empire, the local Stephenville paper. It got picked up by the AP. Suddenly UFO researchers came in, Texas MUFON came in, and everybody was fighting over the witnesses.
Right.
So Nancy said, you guys have to divert to Stephenville. This is your show. This is current. It's not a historic case. This is happening right now. It's news. So we literally changed the whole thing and went to Stephenville because Stephenville was so complicated. What we did was we broke. Now we had 4 people. We had Ted
Bill,
Ackworth.
before you could, what do you mean by complicated?
Complicated was you had state police officers, right?
Right.
The constable of, I think it was Erath County.
Right.
The constable of Erath County. You had MUFON. You had a group of witnesses that were brought in by MUFON who were telling all kinds of crazy stories.
Yeah, you had the pilot guy. You had the pilot. You had the
pilot. You had the radar expert.
The radar expert, right?
And then you had these unbelievably fabulous witnesses, like this woman who we never named, with these cheerleaders. And you had this image of this craft hovering over Stephenville. So there was so much story. And then you had Ted Ackworth, and his assistant was Jeff Tomlinson. You had Pat, and you had myself. So the story was so big, the 3 of us couldn't run around together. So what we all decided was, let's break the investigation into 3. Ted and Jeff would pursue the science. Pat would pursue some of the witnesses. I'd pursue the MUFON angle with other witnesses. And then we would all get together in our office, because we rented office space in downtown Stephenville. Great idea. That carried over to the second season.
Right.
We rented office space, and we went on the radio, and we're inviting witnesses to come in. Well, that had never been done before in any of these UFO shows. One of the people who came in was this person, Marcy. And she showed this video of the strange light, and this was on a night vision infrared camera. So this was a heat signature of this beam coming down from out of frame, from above the frame, scanning the ground and then snapping off. And then another person saw that. So what we did was we had the 3 of us pursuing separate storylines. That was one of the highest rated shows in that season. That was off the charts. We were beating a whole bunch of shows on other channels. History at that point knew that format worked. And that's the format that carried over into the second season. And if you notice in the second season, there were 3 storylines for each episode. I pursued one, Pat pursued another, Ted pursued a third.
Right. And that that worked for me, and I think that worked for everybody. And before I lose this thought, your ratings were good. Life is wonderful. You've just to get picked up for a second season in this town in Burbank is success. Off of your pilot show to get to your first season, but to get to a second season and to a third season, you're making money for the network. Things are good. The ratings are there. Everybody's happy. You haven't pissed off the status quo yet. Things are good. Things are, but even in your position, and we can talk about it. So many people in the radio industry, it doesn't matter about your ratings, does it? In the end, you can be canceled for just about any reason, and right or wrong, it's never up to you. And you can stand on a soapbox and yell and scream, but things are never in your control, are they?
Mm-hmm. No. So here's what happened. Okay. 1, Ted had a baby, right? I mean, Ted's wife
had a baby? Oh, okay. His wife had a baby.
Right. I mean, Ted's wife had a baby. She had a full-time job. She was an international banker. Ted was starting a company called Archaic. Good luck to him. He's doing well with it. I mean, he's a friend. I mean, he's doing well with it.
Okay.
He started a company called Archaic, which was part of a business enterprise that was going on at MIT. After Ted got his PhD from Stanford in physics, he then got an MBA from Sloan Business School at MIT. So Ted's schedule was completely compromised. Now, I was living on the West, Nancy and I were living on the West Coast. That was all wonderful. We were filming out of the West Coast. But as winter socked in, one of our sponsors was Southwest Airlines. Now, if you know Southwest Airlines back then, they didn't have that many routes. They were a very inexpensive airline. They were great. We loved them. We loved the pilots. But if there was fog in Florida and there was a snowstorm in Manchester, in New Hampshire, the plane that would take you from Philly or from Logan to Burbank couldn't fly because it wasn't there. And so there were all kinds of schedule hiccups because of that. So that was one problem. But here's the bigger problem. And yes, we stepped on some mighty big toes, but here's the bigger problem. What was happening in the reality television industry, and not just to history, but to history, A&E, all the channels, was that they discovered that the American viewing public loved these interactions, these organic interactions between lots of characters fighting, arguing over minutia.
Yes.
So the archetypal show was Ice Road Truckers.
Sure.
Where you'd have these guys who were, they loved. It was called. We called it trailer park reality.
Well, I really think you're rationalizing. I really don't think those are the reasons. I think you were taken off the air by the very next picture in the gallery.
Well,
I think you're just dreaming.
I know. I know what it costs to film UFO files. I know what it costs to film.
Talk about the next picture.
I will, but I know what it costs to film us. And when you had Ice Road Truckers, swamp people, crocodile folks, porn stars, American
those
pickers,
guys are getting fortunes. They're not cheap shows. Don't kid yourself.
No. They're getting high they're getting high salaries, but their ratings are through the roof because people want to see that kind of reality. History
you had
created
really high. You had
channel.
The highest ratings history ever had.
Yes, we did. But History created a channel called H2, and that's where they moved all their quote-unquote paranormal shows and cut the budgets down to the bone. That was one of the reasons.
Well, and I'll just say this because I do want to get to this photograph because it is an amazing photograph. On its own right, just standing on its own, the picture is amazing. It's not posted yet. I'm just letting everybody know it's not part of this gallery. We're going to post it in just a second on my signal. Okay, so on my mark, unleash hell.
Don't be eating dinner.
Right. So anyway, but Bill and Nancy, to Bill's point, when you have a bean counter, and this is the truth, when you have a bean counter that says we can get this kind of ratings and this kind of ad revenue out of only sinking $30,000 or $100,000 per episode into a show, and our profits are now 300% more than this other show that's costing us $300,000 or $400,000 an episode, and we're not making as much money. That is, and we can get more. That's just the way. It doesn't matter how good your show is. It always comes down to money, and that's the truth. So is ratings always going to carry you? Well, to a point. What's the cost of the show? How much is the ad revenue coming, in on that show? Ratings is a consideration, but it's just a piece of the puzzle. But if you have somebody above you, a boss, that it takes offense to anything that you do or say, you get canceled anyway because there's another show that's being produced right here in the Valley right now that will get those same ratings. And will cost them the same amount of money. There is no shortage of programming. There's just not. Everybody here in L.A., you guys know this. You lived in Marina Del Rey. Every waiter or waitress that ever served any of your tables up and down Washington Boulevard, okay, has a screenplay and is developing something.
Right.
It is the truth.
Right.
So, and every producer, every wannabe producer in L.A., and believe me, I had a long history, but before the show of doing movies and producing, every producer is like a dog with a script in his mouth. That's from Dick Clark. Every producer is like a dog, because that's what he said to me. Yeah. Every producer is like a dog with a script in his mouth. They are going from place to place. There is absolutely no shortage of material for shows, reality shows, dramatic productions, you name it.
Okay, let's do the big dramatic pause here. I'm going to my producers right now are listening to me. Go ahead and cue it up. Let's get this photograph going. The big picture, and I'm going to set this up somewhat. Nancy just referenced it, but I'm going to say this now as I'm waiting for the notice that everybody can update their screen and refresh. Is this number one? If you have any children in the room, okay, and you don't want them to see anything that can be a little bit freakish, have them leave the room and turn away from the screen, because this is not an easy picture to look at. That's number one. Number two, it is a fantastic picture. And when you look at this picture and you understand exactly what you're looking at, then questions arise. And I'm not giving some big dramatic pause to this because the picture stands on its own. Number three, to Nancy's point, this is, okay, everybody can refresh their screens at this moment. Everybody go to jimmychurchradio.com, refresh your screen. I'm going to do it here too as well, so I know exactly where the picture is, and I will announce it. Okay, so on the home page, scroll down, and there it is. Okay, it's in the gallery. It's the last picture, and you're not going to miss it. And Bill, I'll let you describe the picture. I grabbed the one. Anyway, it's the entire picture. It's not the one, Nancy, that you had sent me earlier. It's the larger one. But let me just say this before: if you have children in the room, if you have food out, if you need to eat, you need to do all of that. Put all of that aside for a few minutes. We'll have this picture up, and we will now set up for what we are looking at. It is about as dramatic as it gets. Now, this possibly is what got you fired from the network. And I want your opinion on that. Nancy and I have talked about this already today, too, as well. And I think she just voiced her opinion on it. But this could end a series, too. And why, as we look at this, I've now blown it up. I'm looking at the picture, Bill. How did this get on the air? If it, yeah, exactly. If you got fired for this picture, then didn't one of the producers on the show that allowed this out of the editing bay, did he lose his job too, or was it just the ending of the series? Okay, so what are we looking?
It's a multi-stage process.
Okay, what are we looking at in this picture?
What you are looking at is a fetus, ostensibly from a mutilated cow, that was lying on the side of the road outside on the side of the road in Dulce, New Mexico, near the Archuleta Mesa, which is supposedly under which is the notorious Dulce base. A state police trooper named Gabe Valdez, very famous in UFO lore, a state police trooper named Gabe Valdez said that he was in a car. Dulce is on his beat. He was in a car, a police unit, and they saw a mutilated cow on the side of the road, or they saw a cow on the side of the road. They didn't know it was mutilated when, from a distance. Hovering over that cow, the dead carcass, was a helicopter again, but it wasn't doing that thwap, thwap, thwap. Was relatively silent, and it had strange markings. He actually showed us a photo of the markings, and for the life of me, I couldn't tell you what it was. Pat was in the Army. He didn't know what it was. It was just these strange markings.
No, I've seen, Bill, I'm just going to cut you off for everybody out there really quick, and I apologize for interrupting. I've seen the same helicopters today. I was looking for, and I'm raised in the military. I'm an Army brat. I've seen enough black helicopters in my life. I've never seen markings like that on the helicopter.
Right. Exactly. What were those markings? It certainly didn't identify as United States Army helicopter, that's for sure.
Nope.
The helicopter sees the police car lights. He turns on his light bar. The helicopter pilot and he peels off, leaving the carcass on the road. The state police get there. Gabe Valdez looks at this thing, and the cow is pregnant. So what they do is they cut open the womb, and they see this unbelievable, almost like from the island of Dr. Moreau. They see this unbelievable fetus. It's not a cow.
Okay, let me stop. I have to stop you really quick. What you are trying to say is what is in this picture is exactly how it came out of the cow with all of the incisions and everything else. This is the way it was inside of the cow?
The incisions were made by a veterinarian afterwards. Their first job, and the veterinarian was basically Gabe Valdez's cousin. What they did was they basically did a C-section on the cow, took the fetus out, wrapped it up, brought it to a local veterinarian in near Dulce, and that's where the photographs were taken.
Okay.
But why don't you tell people what makes that fetus special?
Exactly. That Nancy, you and I, Bill, I'm Nancy's new co-host because, Bill, what I'm looking at is the body of a cow and the head of a human, unless I'm not. Okay,
no, that's exactly what you're looking at: the body of a cow and the head of a human. That's exactly what you're looking at.
Now, would you say human would you say human or maybe alien? Because the skull looks pretty large too. Now, with the hand that is there, I'm trying to stay relative here, but with the hand that is there, it looks like the face is rather small. Did he have another picture, by the way, or was this it?
No, that was the one he came.
And also, it is blurry. People have asked me, because I've become friends with the Twitter guy. He asked, is it supposed to be blurry? And yeah, that's as good as we've gotten, because we're picking that right out of the...
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's a photograph from the show.
Yeah, I did the best that I could.
Right.
So, okay, so anyway, back to... Because this is an amazing... Now, okay.
Right. So let me.
Okay.
So let me
please continue.
I'm
I don't even know what to say looking at this.
No.
It's pretty crazy.
Here is the photo in context. So we're talking with Gabe Valdez, and so this is really a cat and mouse conversation. This is why the photo came at such a point in the conversation. The question was, are there aliens inside the Archuleta Mesa? Which is the story, right? You talk to John Rhodes, Thomas Costello, Ann West. I mean,
Norio Hayakawa,
Benowitz.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. So are there aliens? And Gabe Valdez, and also Norio Hayakawa, Gabe Valdez says, no, this is not an issue of extraterrestrials. And he's sitting with his hand on this old-fashioned attaché case. He says, no. This is not that question. And we say, well, what's going on there? And he says, I cannot tell you what's going on, because if I tell you what's going on, the people who will suffer are the Jicarilla Apache. The Jicarilla Apache, this is their reservation. So this is the Jicarilla Apache Nation. Those people will suffer if I tell you what's going on. Well, now the mystery is even bigger than E.T., right? Why will these people suffer? And he says, I have a picture that will prove why they will suffer. And we said, well, show us the picture. He says, no, I'm not. I said, come on, Gabe, if you come here with a picture in your attaché case and explain to us in a very cryptic way why these Jicarilla Apache are going to suffer, if you show us some evidence of what's at the Mesa, he says, fine.
Well, and then why would he have the picture in his brief? Yeah, if it's in his briefcase, he was going to show it to you anyway. He just needed to be convinced.
Point exactly.
Yeah,
my point exactly.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so we are all marveling at this photo. So that scene goes back to the editing bay. Now, the last show of the previous season, season 2, was the Area 51 show. At the Area 51 show, you talk about a two-punch combination to yourself. At the Area 51 show, what we did was we lugged this kind of 350-millimeter lens. You can imagine how big that would have been, up a 15-foot incline, up Tickaboo Peak, set up a camera, limbered a camera, set it up so that at night, this is like 2 a.m, set it up at night so that at dawn we could get a shot with the sun rising behind us of Area 51 with this telephoto lens. Well, I have to tell you, the blowback from that shot showing this huge hangar, which the government was trying to keep secret, caused such a stir at Pentagon levels that they supposedly went to Disney, which owns History Channel, and really raised a fuss. So we were in trouble at that point. But they said, I'll let them go. When the network said, we can't air this photo, for the same reason, Jamie, that you said, children leave the room. This is a family show. It's like on at a family hour. You cannot show the photo. We pushed back. We said the whole point of this show is what's going on underneath the Archuleta Mesa, what's going on at Dulce. If here's a photograph of what's going on at Dulce, you have to show the photo. So the compromise was, and this was a compromise edit, that they would show the photo coming out of the attaché case, briefly show the three of us looking at it, and shoot the photo and then cut away. And that's what you're seeing in that episode. Well, talk about the fit hitting the shan.
Okay, hold on. In the big picture, really quick, in that third season, what episode was this in the third season? Was it the last episode?
No. I want to say it was episode 2.
Oh, this is the beginning of the third season. Okay, all right.
This is the beginning, yeah.
Well, hence the question. I need to know in the big context. Okay, so you're already in trouble rolling out of the last season with Area 51. Okay, so you've stirred the pot there. You're poking a stick into the hornet's nest, so to speak. You roll into the second season. Your second episode, this hits the airwaves. This photograph. What happens next? I just got to know. Who took that phone call?
Well, what happens next is
we all did.
Yeah, we all did. I mean, there was a lot of blowback. I was on the road, so all I heard was from the producer basically saying, Jesus, why did we show that photograph? I'm saying, why? Look at the ratings. Well, the show was off the charts in the ratings. I mean, just the reruns were getting more coverage than the show itself. So that succeeded. But, from there we went out, I think, down to Florida. But the one of the things that happened was, while the network was reeling from that, because they were getting a lot of phone calls, 3 conservative Republican senators, one of whom was Chuck Grassley, I forget who the other 2 were, but one of them was Chuck Grassley. They introduced a bill in the Senate. And again, we're still in the dark. Oh, this is alien. There's an alien face on this is aliens, right? They introduced a bill in the Senate, making it a crime under the Title 18, which is the Federal Penal Code, making it a crime, Federal Criminal Code, for there to be any interbreeding or DNA intermixing between different species. Well, that's a problem. Okay, so they introduced that bill in the Senate. Now, then we're heading to Bucks County, back this is the third season. So now we've moved to New Jersey. We're heading to Bucks County, and one of the people we speak to is Nancy Talbot from BLT Research. BLT Research is one of the major crop circle research for groups. They do a lot of UFO related research.
Had Nancy on the show last week. We had Nancy on last week.
Right. Okay. So we're sitting with Nancy in Trenton, and Nancy said, and so we're talking about things. She says, "Well, don't you know what you guys did?" And we said, "No. It was an alien, right?" She said, "Guys, you have no idea what you did. You talk about poking a stick into a hornet's nest. You basically broke open a secret. You know who's behind that thing? No, it's big pharmaceuticals and the military and the cattle industry. Do you know what the medical establishment uses to culture human ova for in vitro fertilization? No, bovine serum. Bovine serum and pig serum are very, very close to human serum. So what's going on is bovine serum is used in the pharmaceutical industry to create the culture chemistry for human fertilization, right? So that's one thing. Two, she says, what if you stumbled on a relationship between the military and big pharmaceuticals with a whole bunch of money behind it to find a way to grow human organs in cows? Well, obviously the skepticism arises, and I said, but Nancy, why would you use cows, and why would you have to get mutilated cattle mutes? Why would you use that? Just, the government buys cows, they do all the work, boom, that's easy. She said, no. If the government starts buying entire herds of cattle, and they're doing it in full view of the American people, don't you think that somebody from the Washington Post or some other paper is going to raise a flag and saying, why is the government doing this? What are you looking at? What are you after? Why are you buying this cattle? No. What is the best cover for every covert operation since 1947? I give up. What's the best cover? UFOs.
Crazy UFO people. Right.
Yes.
Yes.
All you've got to do is call it a UFO and a cattle mute and aliens coming down in spaceships and mutilating cattle. That's all you've got to do. The press will fall on its face laughing. People are going to think that it's a science fiction movie, and the government can literally get away with murder. You put your big feet right into one of the most secret things that's going on in the field.
Yeah, but how does Nancy Talbot come to all that insider information?
Because she said that what's going on is not just that, but the worry that the Department of Agriculture has that huge sections of the American beef stock have mad cow disease. Can you imagine if that got out? Talk about the end of McDonald's, the end of Burger King. And she said, furthermore, because her biology friends have told her that, furthermore, it takes a good 15 to 20 years for that mad cow disease to work its way through the human population. So what you don't know is most of the cattle stock could be infected right now, and they're bending over, they're twisting like pretzels to figure out what to do. And so if part of this is to see how many cows from certain herds and certain herd stocks are infected, and they're using that to grow human organs, the last thing you want to do is grow a human organ in a cow that has mad cow disease. You really stepped in it big time.
So what happened next? You get the phone call. Okay.
Next, there is this crossbreeding thing. So making it a federal crime to interbreed DNA between species, that basically puts, at least from the criminal point of view, the kibosh on doing this. Billions of dollars are invested in this research. Now, in addition to the military already angry at you for Area 51, now they're really angry at you for this because you've done the one thing. You can talk about UFOs. You can talk about USOs. You can talk about alien species wandering the earth. But whatever you do, never get in the way of the government's money. Ever. And that's what we did. And so we began getting rumors. We go from Dulce all the way down to Florida and then to the Andros Island to talk about AUTEC and the Atlantic Undersea Testing Center. And we begin to get these rumblings. Now, after the first episode of season 3, the first episode was a slam bang. We went to Sonora. We were doing filming over Mount Shasta.
Yep.
And one of our people, Mark Olson, actually captured this phenomenal flying triangle. Terrence Masson, our video guy, does the video and says, dudes, this ain't no plane. This is not a helicopter. What you got on film is a flying triangle, a UFO. Well, the ratings were off the charts for that as well.
Absolutely.
So After that, the network is saying to us, guys, for your 4th season, it's the phone call. For your 4th season, you guys get ready. We want you guys to go around the world. We want you guys to go everywhere. Australia, China. The world is your oyster. We're really going to blow this show apart. Wow, we are thrilled. This is it. We're going to get a 4th season right after we complete our season, our first episode. After Dulcie, there's, guys, I don't know, the ratings aren't so good, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
The die was cast.
I'm just glad you're all safe, because I was getting very worried.
Well, with you go from there, from Dulce, and then wasn't that other base is down near Guantanamo Bay? It's down, it's down in the Caribbean.
It's in the Bahamas.
It's in the Bahamas. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
right. It's in the Bahamas. And so, yeah, you're just playing with fire from episode to episode. I mean, couldn't you have just, gone to Kecksburg and hung out a little bit, maybe chilled out instead of?
We went to Kecksburg in season 2.
That's the funny thing. There are so many, but there are so many areas where you step into it. When you mention Kecksburg, that brings up the whole John Ford stuff, where this guy is rotting in prison.
John Ford was Brookhaven.
But
isn't Kecksburg the Acorn thing?
Yes.
Isn't that part of the whole Brookhaven area?
No, the Acorn thing was Needles, California. That was another problem.
No.
Stepped in it.
Yeah, okay, but anyway, but nonetheless, there are so many quicksand holes in this field. Either the government is making up UFOs to cover up other stuff, or there really are UFOs. It's kind of
that's the point of what we did compared to the old UFO files. I mean, that was the point. The old UFO files were you had a bunch of old guys, a bunch of graybeards, and a bunch of self-proclaimed pundits sitting doing these OTF interviews, looking off camera, saying, "Well, there's a UFO over Kansas, and this is what the witnesses said." So, I mean, it was fun. But it was a show with no content. It was a show that basically was scratching the surface. Yes, it cost them $15,000 to $25,000 per episode, maybe even less, to do the show. And then you had all the stock footage.
Yeah, you weren't traveling. It was stock footage, photographs, edits, some graphics on the screen, some narration, some writing.
Right. But I don't think the world is ready for, late night radio is ready for this. People are willing to hear this way without, us, late night radio seems to have always talked about this, but I don't think primetime is ready for a true examination of this because we don't have answers. It's too open-ended, and you can't close it down and go and get your coffee or your beer.
You're right. But here was the difference. This was the big difference. And this, I would say, was really my doing and your doing. My doing, the doing was this. Instead of saying these are UFOs, we went to places and said, what are the conventional arguments against the fact that these are UFOs?
Right. You stepped out of bounds.
Each argument one by one and see if it flies. And what we did was knock down all the skeptical arguments one by one. And that was literally something that I learned from working with police detectives writing true crime books. It's what Sherlock Holmes does in all the Arthur Conan Doyle stories. He goes after the explanations, eliminates them, and what's left is worth investigating. And we did that in the Bentwaters episode, and that too got us in trouble because what we did was prove on camera in that first season that it could not possibly have, that the light in the forest could not possibly have come from the Orford Ness Lighthouse for real physical reasons.
Right.
2, that the holes in the ground in Rendlesham Forest could not possibly have been from rabbit scrapings.
Correct.
3, that RAF Bentwaters was a nuclear weapons base. 4, that if there were no UFOs and this was a big, funny, funky story, why were the British MI5, the Air Force AFOSI, the Office of Special Investigations, and the NSA that had a base, a station at the Orford Ness Lighthouse, because it overlooks the North Sea, that had a base there, why were they investigating this? Why would they tell the various enlisted personnel to lie to their commanding officer? Then there was the story of Charles Halt, who had a long history in U.S. intelligence. This guy has a background, I can tell you that, because off camera we talked about something that I knew about from the Vietnam War, and I brought it up to him. Not going to go into it here. And he said, "You ever tell me that again, I will never talk to you again." Okay, so Charles Halt's voice recorder. Oh, why was that voice recorder only on when he was looking at every time the lighthouse spun? Well, he brings out the voice recorder and said the battery was dying, so I was hitting it every few seconds to save the battery. Finally, last point. Gary Hazeltine, who did the Prufos reports for the UK, Gary Hazeltine, who was an RAF security officer, a police officer, brings up on the show, gee, you know, it's funny. Every single base, nuclear weapons bases, especially in the RAF, always have somebody in the watchtower 24/7. And Charles Halt pops up with, "You're right. That's exactly what happens." And here's an email from someone I will not mention because he was sworn to secrecy and I don't want to break his code of silence, who said he's in the watchtower. He saw the entire thing, particularly the strange UFO-type lights hovering over the base on 2 different nights. Well, there you go.
And then I want to talk about the series and how it ended, but I want to stay on Rendlesham for a second. I do have a couple of issues with Rendlesham, and I know something happened there. We all do. Something happened. I'm still not too sure exactly what it is or what it was, but I know something was there. I'll expand on that in a second. Just I want to get this thought out. The one issue that I have is that except for Halt is stayed true, but I think everybody else involved, and I've invited every single one of them onto this show, every single one, and until these books come out next month, nobody wants to talk. Okay, fine, but they all listen to this show, every single one of them. Is this? The story has gotten a little out of control. It's gotten a little bit too fantastical as time has moved on. For the first 4 or 5 years, 6 years in the 90s, it stayed solid. Everything was good. And it's just gotten a little bit out of control. And if they want us to investigate and take it serious, just stay to, you don't need to sensationalize.
Yeah, but aren't there 2 factions that are fighting?
Yeah, exactly right. Yes, absolutely.
But I don't think they contradict each other so much. I think they both are trying to buy the story, or own the story more than contradictions.
We saw the same thing with Corso. So I mean,
we're going to get to okay. We're going to spend the last hour, my friend Bill Birnes, on Corso. Okay, nobody studied that book. No, nobody except for you knows that book better than me. Okay, so
except for Nancy, who knew Corso, who spoke to Corso more than I did. But
okay,
I mean,
fantastic. Okay, so let's just hold off on Corso
sure,
for a second. But
it's a model. It's a model of how stories get conflated as they grow, as more people from the outside of the story, in the UFO community particularly.
Yeah, but also mention checkbook. Mention checkbook journalism.
Yes.
Because that's what's causing the rifts.
Right. Well, as the story grows, more people come in holding checkbooks out and say, well, gee, we could really do a book or a TV movie if your story involved this. Oh, it does.
Right,
I saw
right.
with my own eyes.
Sure. And there's no question about that in any in any story. It doesn't forget about UFOs. It could be just about anything, but specifically with Rendlesham, where the original, the first night of Halt getting called out, and then the second night of him, he's at the party or it's New Year's Eve. All of that is documented. You have the memos that were written. You have everything that was tape recorded. You've got everything, the Geiger counter stuff. You've got the core group of officer or NCOs too. Everybody that was out there.
Right.
All of that testimony is solid, rock solid, and the fact that his tape recorder was running, so you can the transcriptions. And Bill, I'll say this, and Nancy, back when those first surfaced on the net in the 90s, and you know how hard it was to navigate the internet back then, but I actually found audio on the internet of those, and I listened and read the transcripts. Thank goodness that we had that evidence. It's right there. It's rock solid. But when you go from that to the symbols on the craft, and I touch the craft, and binary languages and everything that came out, it's like slow down, or come on the show and speak to me and defend your position and tell me why you held off on this information and why come out later. I'm just saying it just seems to have grown. And Nancy, you're probably right. Checkbooks.
So here's one of the issues. After the events happened, as I said, you had AFOSI, the NSA, and MI5 homing in on this immediately. One of the things that the Office of Special Investigations for the Air Force did, and I know this because I spoke to Jim Pennison. Jim Pennison and I were friends. I was on the air with Larry Warren, so I do know the story. And of course, Chuck Halt told me this too. What they did, what the AFOSI did, was they told the people, the enlisted personnel, not Halt. He was a deputy base commander. It was hands off him. But they told these enlisted personnel, Sergeant Pennison, for example, you cannot, first of all, tell a different story to your commander. So Conrad, who was, I think he was Colonel Conrad was the commander of the base, commandant of the base, he never got the full story from his enlisted personnel because they were told not to tell him the whole story specifically. Then what they did, and this is where Larry Warren's story does hold some water, then what they did was they used all kinds of counter-conditioning techniques. They used drugs. They used drugs. They used nothing short of mental torture. They used these things to try and muck up the story that these guys had to erase whatever memories they could. Was it sophisticated? No. Was it painful? Yes. And so you had guys whose memories after the event were very, very clouded. All you really had was the base story that the security detail left on the first night of these sightings, went into the forest. They saw this oval-shaped craft that had landed on the ground. They didn't know what to make of it. They entered this envelope, and I'm calling it an envelope, of heavy static electricity, which slowed down the electron functions of their neural system. So as a result, they were completely disoriented. Their memories were very confused. The next night, when this thing appeared, the lights appeared over the base. That's when Charles Halt, who didn't believe the story in the first place,
that's right,
said, that's it. I'm going to put an end to this right now. This is nonsense. He went out with radios and light-alls and things like that, and the radios conked out. They saw the light. They saw this object through the foliage in the forest, went out to a clearing. It was sitting on land outside of the forest, which meant the Air Force, the U.S. Air Force guys couldn't go in the clearing. It was private property. Then he said it split into 5 different pieces. Well, the immediate counter story was, these idiot Americans, what do they know? They saw the beam from the lighthouse. That's why one of the things we did was not only go to the lighthouse and find out that there was a light bar around the lighthouse so it couldn't shine over the land in that position, A. B, even if it could shine over that position, we did GPS waypoints where Charles Holt said he saw the light, where the farmhouse windows were, and where the object was. And we proved, using GPS and scale models, it could not possibly have been, they could not possibly have been seeing the lighthouse, because the lighthouse was in absolutely the wrong position from where the object was. So all that we established. What happened was that because of the, I would say, interference, I would say the counter conditioning of the Air Force itself, all these guys had very serious memory problems. They couldn't tell their whole stories to their commander, Conrad. They couldn't tell him that. And for years, they were under this threat by people from both the NSA and the Air Force that their pensions would be in jeopardy if they spoke up. So what you're talking about in terms of conflated stories, yes, there was certainly conflation. I believe there was conflation because stuff came out at the end. There was all this talk about, oh, let's get hypnotic regression, as if that's going to solve the problem, and talk about this. And so all kinds of muck came up. And to this day, I cannot tell you what's true in those stories and what's not, except for the bare bones story that Chuck Holt told and what I heard from the enlisted personnel when we talked to them after the episode.
Well, and that's and I totally, which I guess that reinforces what I just said about this whole thing. You know, the core story is rock solid. You've got taped evidence, you've got your eyewitnesses, you've got transcripts, and the original memos and everything else. The core story itself stands on its own. But these are the 2 points I want to raise. Or I have 1 point and then a question back at you. The 1 point is this. The whole lighthouse charade is just that. That lighthouse wasn't built the week before this sighting was. Everybody there had been seeing that lighthouse flash its light, you know, seasons in, seasons out for years, and everybody on that base knew exactly what, you know. It's like clockwork. Every night it gets dark, here comes the lighthouse. You know, so they knew the difference between anything in those woods and the light from the lighthouse. So that just doesn't hold water for me. If the government or whoever wants to use that as an excuse, that's what they were seeing. That doesn't hold water for me.
It was the Brits. It was the British debunkers
right.
that jumped on this.
Yeah, and so the lighthouse was always there. Everybody knew about this. So Colonel Holt and all of those guys at a nuclear weapons facility are smart enough to know the difference between a lighthouse and something foreign in the woods. That's why they were there.
Or a weather balloon.
How about
from Roswell?
Well, yes, how about some swamp gas? But this is the thing. They would have been dispatched every night, Bill, to go chase those those lights from the lighthouse. It was only on these specific.
The lighthouse light was flashing in the wrong place.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
What Chuck Holt told me was that where they would see the Orford Nest light as it rotated was from the runways, not from the forest.
Okay, well, again, now, okay, so back to my question back at you, now that I made that point. Out of that whole core group of guys, could you, look at me in my eyeballs right now and just say, Jimmy, I believe everything that they said. Those guys are all rock solid. Is that how you, I haven't met them, so I'm asking you, as you interviewed all of these guys.
Okay, those guys are all honorable guys, okay? The guy I believe the most is Chuck Holt. Chuck Holt, here's one backstory of Chuck Holt, and this is why I believe the guy. Okay, one of my tests for believability, and I'm not some great investigator, but one of my tests is if somebody tells me a story, even if it's off subject, and that story comports with what I know from somebody else who I know was there, then I tend to give that person some credibility, which was why I gave Corso some credibility. In this particular case, one of the one of the really interesting stories coming out of the Vietnam. I know this is off topic. Coming out of the Vietnam War, from 69-ish. It was called Christmas in Vietnam, and in that particular story, the North Vietnamese believed. Remember, the North Vietnamese. I tend to go wild on this, but the North Vietnamese believed that what they were doing in Vietnam was just like what the Americans were doing to the British during the Revolutionary War. That was their premise. It was not some communist insurrection. That was their premise for what they were doing, okay? And the story that resonated with them, and I know this from guys in intelligence who told me this, the story that resonated was Washington's crossing the Delaware River on Christmas, right? So what the North Vietnamese plan was, thinking the U.S. was going to be standing down, they had a whole plan to send a convoy of trucks down the Ho Chi Minh Trail into South Vietnam to reinforce themselves. Well, we figured that's what they were going to do. The Air Force figured that's what they were going to do. So the idea was, and I know this from one of the people who was an F-4 pilot over Vietnam, okay, not McCain, but somebody else. He said, he was an Air Force, he was an instructor at the Air Force Academy years later. He said that what we were ready to do was the trucks were going to come down without their lights on. And what we were going to do was drop ground illumination flares over the Ho Chi Minh Trail, light the whole thing up. Then the F-4 fighters would come in, and the fighter bombers, and they would wipe the trucks out. How do you get flares dropped over the Ho Chi Minh Trail? What we were going to use were the big C-130, and some of these gunships, some of these big transport gunships, right? That's what they were going to do. So the Air Force went back to the Air Force in the Pentagon and said, we need spring-loaded traps to drop these flares out, because we need these big, heavy transports that would hover over the Ho Chi Minh Trail, these propeller-driven transports, so they could drop the flares slowly. Well, the Pentagon said, that's going to take 6 months to do. The person who developed those spring-loaded traps, he told me this, we had a long conversation outside the show, was Chuck Holt.
Really?
In Vietnam in 1969. So what he told me about how he developed the spring-loaded traps, and what this F-4 fighter pilot told me what happened in Vietnam, those stories absolutely coincided. So I gave Chuck Holt like 100% credibility. The guy was there. So when Holt ran through the story, not only did it make sense, did it hold up, but Holt's explanation for it. I mean, he told me flat out, I think he said this on the air. He said, I wish to hell I'd never gone out. It was the stupidest thing I ever did. The second stupidest thing I ever did was write that damn report. It was my boss who told me to write the report. He promised me that report would be made secret. He promised me. What happened? Air Force Intelligence released the report. I was furious. Well, that's my other prong of UFO stories. When the person involved in the actual incident says, I never wanted to tell this story in the first place, somebody else took the story out, I tend to believe that. I believed what Peniston said at the outset, that he was part of a team that went out in the forest, saw the object, they were stumbling around, they didn't know what to do, people were really freaking out, they went back to base and they made their report, and then the object came back the next night. I believe that story, okay? That's what I believe. In terms of the ones and zeros, I don't know what to make of that story. In terms of the lettering on the side of the craft, yeah, I can go with that. I can go with that because he said that to us very early in the story, and that also came out early in the story. I don't know about the ones and zeros. I don't know what that is, but I can only tell you the email flood that I received after that episode with people deciphering what the lettering was on the side of that object.
Right.
I don't know what to make of it.
Well, okay. Again, you know all of those guys. I've reached out. The producers here have reached out to everybody. They've all responded back. in due time, Jimmy, in due time. I'm not here to pin anybody against the wall. I'm not a skeptic in any way, and I'm not in a position of trying to even sound like I'm debunking anything, because I know something happened there. I just want an explanation of how everything just got a little bit out of control. Now, the haziness part and the mind control issues, yeah, I'm sure that had a lot to do with it. But I need somebody to tell me. That's all. Because if I have these questions, then so does everybody else. I'm not alone on this island. You know what I'm saying?
No, and you have to go to the right, and you have to go to the source. You really can't listen to this particular pundit, that particular scholar, this particular reacher. You have to go to the person himself.
You're absolutely right. And like I said, if you want to reach out to them and have them, come on the show before these books come out, or this stuff that's getting ready to get released. Then we'll take it from there. And I invite everybody on. And I'm an easy guy. I'm not here to bust anybody's chops. I just need to be.
It's just a living room.
It is. Nobody's listening but us. So okay, now listen, guys. We've got literally, and I'm not taking any commercial breaks. If you don't mind, if you want to take a break, I here at the studios, I'm lucky. I've got a refrigerator full of cold drinks, and I've got my coffee. I'm good to go, so I don't need to do anything. So, so we can keep on moving
go
forward.
Ahead. We're
okay, I'm good. Okay, great. So let's move into Colonel Corso, and I'm going to start this part of the conversation that when this book came out, or when the word of the book came out, you guys know where Sherman Oaks is, and I lived right there south of the boulevard. Across Ventura Boulevard was a Borders Books. Sadly enough, I don't think it's there anymore. But
yeah,
I
love that.
Wait, is that the Borders?
That's
that
the big
was
one.
on?
Ventura.
No, that was one that was on Ventura and Laurel Canyon, right?
No.
It
was that's Studio City. This is Ventura and Van Nuys Boulevard, right there. There was a huge, like 2 or 3 story Borders Books, had an elevator and all kinds of stuff, in a coffee shop on the roof. It was a great place. Well, anyway, when that book came out, I was going in there, hounding him. Wednesday, it's going to be here. It'll be here on Friday. It'll be here on Friday. So I go in. Finally, it's there. I go in. There's a big display, and I go and I grab the book. I went home and read it probably 4 or 5 times, maybe in a week. Just pounded it. Just pages just slapping each other. Okay, so I loaned that book out.
Footnotes.
I loaned that book out to my dentist a couple of weeks later. He had it for about a week. I got it back. I read it again, and my point is that book means a lot to me. Now, so I have to know. I've heard you tell the story, but I want you to tell it for me. How did you two meet Corso? How did that? I know that you were talking to him about some other things, and then he brought up the subject of.
Well, that brings up the picture in the gallery, right? We have the black and white in the gallery.
Yes, we do. Which is picture number 3 in the top row. It's black and white.
Wow, this is well orchestrated, but it is picture number 3. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
And Bill requested we put that one there, and that's why.
Okay, so this is okay. So go ahead, Bill.
That's the genesis. That's the genesis of how Corso came into our purview.
Okay.
So
I see Corso. Who's the gentleman standing behind Corso, shaking hands?
That is Commander. That is Naval Commander Chip Beck, who was the CIA one of the youngest CIA station chiefs. He's a good friend of mine. One of the youngest CIA station chiefs in the CIA's history. He fought in the secret war in Vietnam. He's just written a book about it that I'm going to represent. He's just written a book about it. Chip Beck's research, his passion, he was devoted to the MIAs from Vietnam. And that's where this whole story started.
Okay, so take it from there.
Okay. I had approached this motion picture company, Rosewood Woods Productions, with a friend of mine, believe it or not, Bill Romer, who was one of the FBI directors, one of the special agents in charge of the Chicago office. Bill Romer was the guy who broke the Sam Giancana family, and his book about Sam Giancana, Phyllis McGuire, and what he did, how he busted him. It was like another version of The Untouchables. Became an HBO movie called, I think it was called Summertime, and he had another book. I'll condense it. He had another book, which was a book about. It was a story about. It was a novel. Okay, enough said. And he wanted me to take that. I met Bill Romer because all the way back in the 1980s, we had done a book which we published ourselves. Right? Yeah, Roemer, Bill Romer. We had done a book with this person called his nom de plume, not his real name, was Mike Milan. And Mike Milan claimed, this is a book called The Squad. Folks can still get it. It was really a good book. I loved it. It was a story about a guy who was a hoodlum, a wise guy from New York's Lower East Side who got linked up with Meyer Lansky, with Costello, with all the mob guys, wound up working for the OSS in World War II. And from there, he was encouraged by J. Edgar Hoover. He was recruited by J. Edgar Hoover to be an assassin, a hitman for Hoover. For guys the FBI couldn't touch, Hoover wanted him to do it. That's a whole other story. But when Mike was on Geraldo, sitting next to him was Bill Romer. And Mike is telling the story on Geraldo. He's in disguise. He's telling the story on Geraldo about what he did for J. Edgar Hoover. And everybody is groaning in the audience. Oh, that's bull. Oh, come on. Wait.
Okay.
Bill Romer, deputy director, looks at Mike, and Geraldo asks him, well, Bill, you were in the FBI. You big guy in the FBI. What do you think? Bill Romer looks at Mike. This blew my mind and says, I respect what this man did. Whoa. Okay?
I'm with you.
From one of the deputy directors, a confirmation. Years later, we're in California. Bill Romer
wait. What? Tell the part about taking off the disguises.
But that's irrelevant to this story.
Yeah,
yes,
we're trying to get to Corso. We're trying to tie this into Corso.
Okay,
we're getting
quickly,
close.
This was the first fight on TV, and it was when Geraldo, when the chairs are flying.
Yeah,
Geraldo
absolutely.
It's not that irrelevant.
That's what happened. Oh, no, that's what happened.
That's what
happened.
That
was important.
It was one of the best moments in television history. But one of the greatest moments.
Sitting on the stage who was an informant. He was a guy from the Pagans or some motorcycle gang.
Yeah.
He and Mike got into a fight. And so Mike says, I dare you to take your disguise off. Mike is a real New York hood, right? I dare you to take your disguise off. And the guy says, I'll take it off if you take it off. And they grab their beard disguises and they rip them off. So now this guy who's an informant is masked. He's an informant against the mob. He's masked. Mike goes, you're dead. And that was one of the stories. Okay, that was the story Nancy was talking about. Okay,
it's a moment in time, and
moment in time. So Bill Romer calls me years later and tells me about a novel he's written. Do I know a motion picture? This was after the HBO movie runs. Do I know a motion picture producer who? Yes, I was working with this one group in Hollywood. I take him to that group as his agent. They didn't want to do the story, right? Years before, I had worked with a former special agent in charge at the DEA on an anti-money laundering story called Green Ice. That's a whole other story that is worth 2 hours. But the whole point of that story was we'd gotten it all the way as a movie of the week to NBC, where Scott Sasser loved it, bought it, getting ready to cut the checks. Jeff Zucker, who's now the head of CNN, took NBC out of the movie of the week business, so we're left with green eyes. So this guy and I became friends. So I told this movie company about this guy. Nah, we didn't want to do that. Then they said to me, what do you know about POW MIAs? And they brought me two stories. One from this very famous guy who is still a very good friend of mine, Jim Sanders, who wrote the Downing of TWA book, Downing of TWA Flight 800 book, which is now out in Kindle. Did that book, which is, by the way, under a movie option now. And that book about how the TWA went down, Jim Sanders wrote two books, The Men We Left Behind, The Soldiers of Misfortune. He's writing a book on POW MIAs. The other guy was Chip Beck from the CIA. And Chip Beck and his friend Neil Livingston, who wrote the book Inside the PLO, said, hey, Bill and this other guy, if you want to do a movie of the week on MOWPIA, MIAs and POWs, you should talk to this guy Corso. This guy Corso was worked for MacArthur in the Korean War, Army intelligence, then worked at Eisenhower's White House, and he was one of the lead guys, and this is from guys outside the UFO business.
Sure,
no,
absolutely. Yeah, I get the picture, yeah.
So they're saying he was negotiating Little Switch, Big Switch for Ike, and he's the guy who's now testifying for the Dornan committee on this, who said, we left men behind in Korea. He's the perfect consultant for your movie on MIAs. Great. Well, we're talking to this guy, and Corso says in the committee, oh, Eisenhower knew about the men we left behind because he wrote a finding, one of these intelligence findings, saying we'd left men behind in Korea. He goes into a whole story, again, worth another 2 hours on why, but needless to say, that's what he did. So everybody said, Corso's a crazy old coot. He's like a right-wing nutcase. What a jerk. What a coot. He knows nothing. Where's that finding? And they went running. People went running to the National Archives. No finding. No paperwork. Corso is a liar. Then somebody said, wait a minute. Eisenhower has his presidential library. So they go to the presidential library, and there it is. There is the finding, and in Ike's handwriting, it says, pass to Corso. Well, suddenly Corso was the poster boy for American history and POW MIAs on the cover of Newsweek, on the cover of Time magazine. The movie company gets really excited. They option Phil Corso's life rights to talk about his career in the Army, ostensibly dealing with POWs. We have this big meeting, big meeting, right? Big Hollywood meeting. In the meeting, Corso drops two bombs. Bomb one, he worked for Senator Richard Russell in the Senate on the Internal Government Security Committee, and he investigated the Warren Commission for Russell. Whoa.
Yeah, that's heavy. That's heavy.
Heavy, right?
Very.
And he tells us, he spins a story that later is confirmed. Again, remember, my credibility ratio goes up when a story is confirmed by an extrinsic fact. Confirmed by the tapes, that the Oval Office tapes that Lady Bird Johnson released after her husband died. And in those Oval Office tapes, everything Corso said comes out. Big credibility factor. Then he drops the Roswell bomb.
Did he do? Okay, so let's, as we get into this, did he do this in private with you? The first time Roswell comes out of his mouth, were the two of you alone, or was this at the meeting with the whole
group?
Okay,
no, a whole group.
And this group is not a UFO group; it's a movie company group. They probably have never heard of Roswell, right?
They heard of Roswell, all right. Everybody does, but this was a motion picture company, flat out.
Right.
That had set out to do a movie, which they almost did, by the way. It's, weird story. They did a movie. It was about a call sign Baron 52. These two American fighter pilots escaped from a North Vietnamese prison camp. They're on the run Ronald Reagan knows about this, okay? He's going to make this big Christmas speech about how these two guys escaped, and they run into a Swedish paper mill. What's a Swedish paper mill doing in North Vietnam? They run into a Swedish paper mill to hide and just get asylum. The Swedish ambassador, that SOB, turns these guys over to the North Vietnamese, and they're executed on the spot.
Wait, is this a true story?
Well, true story.
Okay.
Baron 52. Call sign Baron 52.
Okay, so let's stay focused. Let's stay focused.
I know.
Okay.
No, but the funny
well,
part
I'm
is
just
this.
looking at. Bill. I'm looking at the clock. Okay, we have.
I know.
Okay, so go ahead.
So am I.
Okay.
So the folks but you'll love the end of the story. The folks at Turner love it. They're ready to sign the movie. They go to Ted to tell him, boy, the story we got about American POWs escaping. Turner, this is Ted Turner, looks at them and says, do you know what Jane would do to me if I signed that movie? So that was the end of that movie, but it was Corso's Roswell bomb that got people sitting up in their seats. So he tells the story of how he's an Army intelligence, and he gets called in by he's in the 7th Army as Inspector General, and he's about to serve out his time. He's going to retire. That's the end of it. Arthur Trudeau, who's the head of Army R&D and whose career Corso saved when he was in the Eisenhower White House, another story. When he was in the Eisenhower White House, says, I need you to be my deputy in Army R&D in the Foreign Technology Division because I've come across something I need your help in doing. Corso goes and he sees the Roswell file, the real stuff from Roswell. This is Corso's story. Now, in part, Corso throws on the table, okay, this is to partially substantiate his story. The story goes that Arthur Trudeau, who was good friends with the Senate committee or the Armed Services Committee in the Senate, particularly Strom Thurmond, goes to them and tells them that there is a whole file of debris, of foreign technology debris, quote unquote, foreign technology from Roswell that he wants the Senate to fund. So this is all Trudeau, not Corso, that the Senate can fund so he can take that into American industry to develop this technology. Oh, this special material, this cable where you shine a light in it and the lights go, fiber optics, these pieces, these quarter-sized pieces from the craft. And Strom Thurmond says, and this is in not Corso, this is in Trudeau's memoir. Okay?
And this is Corso speaking to the execs at the movie company.
Yes.
Telling this story.
And he throws the memoirs, the published memoirs, on the table and says, here, read that, you'll see it. Indeed, that was in there. And Trudeau tells the story of Strom Thurmond saying to him, no, we will not give you one thin dime unless American industry or defense contractors hold the patent on this material. In other words, reverse engineer it into the industries that are already working on this technology, AT&T, IBM, Monsanto, right? Already working on this technology, they get the patents. You don't get the patents. And again, there's another 2-hour story on why he said that.
No, I understand, Bill. Let me cut you off really quick right there. I understand that part of the story, and I want to get to that part of the story. What I want to understand really quick is let's get to that part. But how did you and Corso come to the idea of writing the book? Let's cut to that really quick, because
here's the idea. Here's the idea.
Okay.
The movie company wants to make a movie. Okay, so they are looking all over the place for where to get the funding for this movie, and everybody tells them, you're not going to get a dime for this crazy movie on UFOs unless you have a book first. So the movie company turns to me and says, can you represent this book? Okay. So I'd published a bunch of books with Simon & Schuster before on true crime. So I go to my editor at Simon & Schuster, and he says, yeah, we'll see. This is where Nancy comes in and says, you don't understand. The Roswell anniversary is in 1997. Go back to Simon & Schuster and tell the editor you will guarantee, you're one of their writers, you will guarantee that book will come out by July 1997 in time for the 50th anniversary.
Bill, I have to cut you off. Something is going on with your connection and your microphone. I don't know if I'm going to reset it.
No, I think it stopped. Were you?
Okay. No, it's not doing it with you, Nancy. Bill, go ahead. Speak again.
Yeah. Okay.
It's you.
Any better?
It's you. No, it's Bill, and it's your microphone. Okay.
Why don't you come in here and switch with me?
Well,
and then I'll see if I can fix it.
Okay.
Do that.
Okay.
Good.
I'll do that.
I'll talk while Bill is walking. He's right next door. And... But Jimmy, can you rephrase your question? Because you had a really specific question when it comes to how this whole thing came about. And here's Bill. Sit down here.
Okay.
Just put this on.
Sure. Oh, that is just nasty. You've got to love live radio. Let's just listen in.
Okay. So.
Whoa. Okay. Hold on. Bill, so the question is this, really quick. And again, we are seriously up against time, and I've got 100 questions I need to get in on Corso. So, so the movie company, that forget about the funding. Okay, great, no funding for the movie. So, was it you that approached Corso about writing the book?
No, it was the movie company that said to Corso, "We will pay you. We will pay you to option your life story for the Roswell story in the Army and any sequel books about your career in the Army if you agree to write this book on Roswell."
How old was he at this time?
78.
And he
79.
And he died a couple of years. How many years later after the book came out?
This would have been in 1995.
Right.
And he died in 1998.
Yeah, it was like 3 years later. Yeah, Nancy, you can't use that microphone.
Okay, I'll take it.
Okay, I see what's wrong with it.
Yeah,
okay,
that's what you were doing. And it was weird, too, because it started low and just got louder and louder and louder.
Okay, that's be an issue for a radio show, so we may have to get another mic. But anyway.
Okay. So you guys,
go ahead.
When you first started, this is where I want to just pick your brain, and let's try to keep these answers a little bit shorter so I can get a bunch of questions in. When he starts out with this, each fact, and we all know now, Kevlar and circuitry and transistors and circuit boards and fiber optics. We know about all of it, but as he's bringing these out, the one thing after another, did you ever pause for a second and just go, now wait a minute? You're talking about inventors at each one of these companies that have claimed patents and creativity, and you are shooting down some people in this industry that are well respected, and you're calling everybody a liar now. And so, did you ever just have pause, or did you? Okay, all right, and what? Tell me, how did you react, and how did he react to it? I mean, was it a matter of fact look at you in your face, a convincing thing? He doesn't have any documentation. You're only taking him on his word.
No. Here's what he said. That in order to make this thing work, what they did was they went to the very companies that were already working on this technology. So no, Corso's story didn't say I invented modern digital computers. What he said was IBM was working very hard on trying to shrink a computer from room size to tabletop size, right? And he said, we knew they were doing that. When we showed them integrated circuits and how they worked, and it wasn't just transistors, because transistors, as you know, came out in 1948, 1949. What he said was, that we went to the very companies who were doing this technology, and we jump-started existing research into that technology. That's how we slipped it in undercover.
So
okay, that made sense.
Okay, night vision. Well, Kevlar was something that nobody was working on, right? That was
right. Well,
that was something that was literally found on the craft, right?
Right.
So that was like backward engineered.
Right, but
right.
night vision was a whole different story. They had the British and the Germans had night vision by the end of World War II. These huge power packs. The Germans had it on their Panzer Division tanks. What Corso said was he had a budget of like $60 million. And he went to the folks at Fort Belvoir. And he said, if the job will be to develop night vision goggles that soldiers could wear, but to develop it in time for the Vietnam War, because we knew we'd be going into Vietnam as early as 1962. If you go to the history of night vision at Fort Belvoir, what they do is they called Arthur Trudeau, Corso's boss, the father of night vision. He showed me the report. There it was. Arthur Trudeau was the father of night vision.
That's interesting.
The only difference in the report was Arthur Trudeau gave them the money and encouraged them to do the development of night vision. What nobody says, of course, which is what Corso said, was that night vision came from, modern night vision, what we now have, the night vision goggles you could buy at Cabela's,
right.
came from the inner eyelid of the dead ET they found at Roswell.
Did you have any idea as you started to unravel this that it was going to turn into what it turned into? Because it got big, and it got big fast.
Yes, and I'll tell you how I knew. When I began, this thing was going so crazy. The intensity of getting this book done was so hard. It was so much pressure that I was working literally 24/7 on an old Macintosh that's now sitting on the shelf. I was working 24/7. And as I was doing it, this was going to be a paperback book originally, like a mass market paperback. The publisher at that division of Simon & Schuster, Pocket Books, which part of Atria, said to my editor, "Tell Birnes, if we like the manuscript, we're going to put it into hardcover." So that was one thing. So I'm working to get this book to be a hardcover publication. Then they said, "Hey, if Corso is such good friends with Strom Thurmond, tell him, could you get Corso to go down to Washington?" He lived in Florida. "Can you get him to go down up to Washington and see if he can get Strom Thurmond to put a forward to this book, a forward or a blurb or a statement?" Well, Corso had written a book called I Walked with Giants. It was his memoir about all the people he knew. So my idea was, I said to Phil, "Look, you see, here's Strom Thurmond's statement, and here's his release. Can you go to your friend Strom Thurmond?" And remember, Corso was as deaf as a stone. Strom Thurmond was as deaf as a stone. Two guys could not hear each other.
Right.
Could you go to Strom Thurmond and could you get him to change this release so that this forward is now for Day After Roswell? Corso goes to Washington, talks to Thurmond. Thurmond agrees. I get the written, signed permission slip from Strom Thurmond, give it to Simon & Schuster. Now we have Senator Strom Thurmond's forward in the first edition. Well, at that point, Simon & Schuster says, "You got a hardcover deal. We're going all the way with this in terms of publicity." And that's what happened.
And now, when the timelines started to match up, because you had to work hand in hand with him, all of his stories have to mesh, right? You're plotting everything out. Monsanto here, DuPont here, whatever, Bell Laboratories is working on this.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And everything's got to fit, because if Bell Labs, and everybody knows that listens to the show, I used to work for Bell Laboratories when I was a kid. So, and when you work at Bell Labs, you understand the history of the transistor, by the way, and the
Right.
microphone. But if he's telling his story, and then suddenly you're doing your research, and the transistor is invented in 1946, Roswell happens in 47, then his story doesn't hold water. So you're putting, you know what I'm saying? But
yes,
but
except for one thing.
But here's my
The
question.
transistor-
But
Go ahead.
here's my question. No, the transistor was later. But what I'm saying is the everything's got to fit the calendar. Everything, all of his stories have to. And so as you're putting it all together, did you ever stop and go, okay, holy crap, seriously, he is telling the truth? I may have been along for. Well, you know what I mean. I may have been along for the ride, and it's a good story, and let's write a book, but it's turning out to be true.
Right. The story went something like this. The transistor was invented in 1948, was patented in 49, got a commercial patent in 50.
Right.
In 1947, this is a story Corso told me that I think we might have put in the book. It's been so long, I don't remember. But what Corso said was that in 1947, what Harry Truman, and by the way, Harry Truman was the first president to make a public disclosure that UFOs were real. This was after the 1952 invasion over Washington. He said that. It's on record. I basically heard it myself. So Harry Truman said to, I think, the chairman of whatever armed service committee, take what we found at Roswell, bring it to whatever company is working on this material, the lowest common denominator of technology, and see what they can do with it. Well, it was these electronic circuits. They took it to Western Electric Bell Labs, where Brattain and Shockley, who for 15 years had been trying to find a piece of circuitry that could replace the old-fashioned Edison tube, right? The filament light bulb.
On and off, on and off,
right?
on and off. Exactly.
Right, okay? They couldn't do it. Why? Because they didn't know how to control the flow of a single electron in one direction and then shut it off.
Right.
So
that's what I was just saying. On and off. On and off.
Resistor at the
Right.
same time.
Right.
Okay? When they got this piece of debris from the Roswell craft, they examined the silicon base. And when they did a chemical analysis of what was in the silicon base, they saw the formula wasn't pure silicon. It was doped with arsenic. And as they tried to develop that, they found they could then control the flow of electrons across that circuit one at a time as an on-off switch. That single event started the entire computer revolution. And that came, according to Corso, from a piece of debris at Roswell.
Is Nancy taping you to the chair with some duct tape? Is that what's going on?
No.
Okay.
No, she's trying to figure out why that microphone is not working on the iPad. That's what she's trying
okay, so did you and I want to know, because everybody has that aha moment where it's all comes together and you can move forward. You know that there's not any hiccups. There's nothing that you need to overcome, work around, work through. So did you actually have that aha moment, and did it energize you and allow you to power through it as quick as possible?
Well, the aha moment was, holy mackerel, this could actually be real. I mean, I wasn't a skeptic. I didn't really care. I'd had a UFO sighting back in the 1950s.
Right.
Oh, great. There you go. I remember in 1978 when Stan Friedman was talking about Jesse Marcel going public about Roswell. But quite frankly, who cares? I mean, that was my attitude. I hate to be so blasé, but yeah, they're aliens. Who cares? Really?
Okay.
I mean, it didn't change one iota of my life. Suddenly, I'm talking to Corso. I'm seeing these records. And as I said, Corso had a long other history besides UFOs. And saying to myself, wow, American history really, human history really did change. The other big aha moment came when everybody was bracing for the blowback from all these industries we mentioned.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
Because what we're saying is, I mean, look at the seriousness of this. AT&T doesn't really own the patent on the transistor. It came from outer space.
Right.
IBM doesn't really own the mini computer because it came from outer space. Kevlar, fiber optics,
Right.
lasers,
Yep.
outer space. Where are the challenges from all these industries? Not a peep. Where's the challenge from the Pentagon? Not a peep. In fact, the Pentagon bought thousands of books and sold them at the Pentagon bookstores at all the bases around the country. What about Strom Thurmond? The screaming from Strom Thurmond. His staff said, look, he didn't know what he was doing. He didn't know what he was saying. You got to take it out. Then Strom Thurmond pipes up with the statement, we didn't need a crash at Roswell to win the Cold War. What kind of statement is that? We didn't need a crash at Roswell to win the Cold War. This is all public information. This is on the record.
And you just said something that is amazing to me. But now that I look back and think about this, not one company stepped forward and said that he was lying.
You worked at AT&T. You know exactly what AT&T is like, right?
Well, I do.
You get in the way of somebody's patent, they will kill you.
Yes.
AT&T didn't say a word.
Wow. You know, where you brought up a memory. I worked for Bell Labs Indianapolis. You know, there's Cherry Hill, and you know, there's all of these other. When I worked for them, if my memory serves, I think there was probably 15, 20, 30 different Bell laboratories around the country. I worked at Indianapolis. And in Indianapolis, there was, we were originally part of, and remember, Bill, and you said this earlier, the truth is in the details, right? The truth is in the details, right? So I will tell you exactly what was going on at Bell Labs. Why? Because I was actually there. Okay, and Bell Labs Indianapolis was originally part of Western Electric, and Western Electric had the largest plastics injection molding plant in the world there. So all of your Princess phones that you talked to in the 1960s, right? Everything was made there. All the injection molding, everything was done there. In the front of the Western Electric plant was Bell Laboratories, which occupied 2 floors of this building. Massive factory. I don't know, 25, 30, 40, 50,000 workers, 7 stories underground, 20 train tracks out back, no exaggeration, just absolutely insane facility. But then we moved to another facility where they built us three separate buildings, 5 stories tall. In the middle of one of those buildings was on the 5th floor, beautiful office, was a 24/7 in-house patent attorney. And that's all that guy did. I can't remember. Well, I know his name. I don't want to say it, but but you're absolutely right. That is all. They very aggressively protect their intellectual properties, and it is no joke. And for this transistor, and you know, and I feel really bad for Shockley and for this to come out and for his family, because it just completely erases or attempts to rewrite history on all fronts. But you know, I was there, and I know how proud they were of the transistor, and to think that it could have all been, you know, not real. It kind of messes
the transistor, as you know, was patented by Bell Labs. It was patented a number of times, and what happened was the Army got furious with Bell Labs for patenting the transistor. They said, we gave this to you.
That's right.
How dare you patent it? So that was the other side of this Arthur Trudeau story, that the Army, because you'd say, well, gee, if that worked with the transistor, I mean, think of the logic here. If that works with the transistor, and we had all this debris this technology sitting in the Pentagon from 1947 to 1961, why was that the only thing that got patented? Well, here was the answer. The Army withheld it from industry. The Army R&D, when Arthur Trudeau got there, and again, that's a whole other story, but when Arthur Trudeau got there, was this backwater command. When he got his third star, going to lieutenant general, his going to R&D was kind of a punishment because of what he did by exposing the fact that the CIA's Gehlen spy ring in West Germany, Gehlen was a Nazi, he was SS, that the CIA's Gehlen spy ring had been penetrated by the East German Stasi. Well, Trudeau blew the whistle on Allen Dulles. And so Allen Dulles wanted Trudeau kicked right out of the Army, retire the guy, cashier him out. He shot his mouth off. Well, Corso was at the Eisenhower White House, and he and some other majors and colonels went to the Senate and said, you can't do this. Arthur Trudeau is a Korean War hero. You can't do this to this guy. He was, like the Edward Snowden of his day. He blew the whistle on the CIA being penetrated by the communists. So that's how Trudeau got to Army R&D. He gets to Army R&D, and he finds out that there's not only a Roswell file of debris, but that the Army has kept it secret since 1947. And that's why he went to Strom Thurmond in the first place.
Well, and if there's a couple of little things in this that just make me take a step back, because I take the book as true in its totality. I really do. But a file cabinet, really, protecting something from a flying saucer that has crashed in the desert, foreign technology of whatever degree, and it's just in a filing cabinet floating around. Not an underground vault,
Nope.
Not in Cheyenne Mountain, but
well, it was no Cheyenne Mountain.
But if you know what I'm saying,
Yeah, I do. But see, the thing was that. And again, this was one of the reasons why Corso lit up when we talked about the book. The fight about this debris wasn't really about the debris itself. The fight about this debris was which branch of the service was going to develop this. That was one fight. So you got the Army fighting with the Navy, fighting with the Air Force, the Army Air Force in 47, but just fighting all the way around. And then in 1948, the CIA came into existence. So now you had a central intelligence agency and all these people who are sniffing around. And remember, the Roswell debris, that went to Fort Worth. Then it went to Wright Field, later Wright-Patterson, then to the Pentagon. So everybody in the armed services were all fighting over this stuff. What Corso said was that the Army had its own catch of material. And when the services split, August 1947, when the Air Force and the Army split, the humongous bulk went to the Air Force at Wright Field. Nathan Twining of the Air Materiel Command was the guy who sat on this stuff. But there was a catch of material that was in the Army, that stayed in the Army, and that's what was in Trudeau's custody.
And again, I'm not really devil's advocate, but these are just the obvious questions. Isn't it convenient that in this file cabinet just happens to be 5 or 6 separate, none of these things are relative to each other. Well, take the eyelid out. We'll take that part out. But, the Kevlar, the circuit board, all of these components are all together by themselves, in a file cabinet. Doesn't that sound too convenient?
Well, what's worse to me,
because because nobody knows what Bill, nobody knew what it was. So
that was the thing. Nobody knew what it was. But the other thing was, why is that technology? Why was that if this was a craft that came from another planet, why was that technology so close to where we were in 1947?
Yeah, it's
That's
bizarre.
the one thing that
Sure.
bothered me about the book. If
Sure.
these guys are like space cadet, right? Space commandos crashing in Roswell, traveling through time, special propulsion.
Right.
Huh?
Yeah, they're
It's
20,000 years
electronic
away from us.
circuitry?
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
That bothered me.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and so was there anything else that and the book stands on its own. So I'm just saying, was there anything that made you pause and maybe doubt the story?
Well, the thing that made me doubt the story is, well, not doubt the story, but doubt everything around the story. I still could not get my mind around the fact that this stuff was sitting there since 1947 and nobody did anything about it. I mean, here's technology. We're fighting the Korean War in 1949. The Soviets now, by 1950, have the atomic bomb. The Chinese, and we're sitting with debris from an advanced civilization, and nothing is happening for what? For like 11, 12 years?
Right.
That bothered me.
Well, I'm sorry. I was just reading a note from my producers here saying maybe next Thursday we'll bring you in for another hour and we'll do a part 2.
Sure.
I kind of agree to that because we I'm serious, just barely scratched the surface. And I feel like we just got to start on the book. So, well, okay, let me ask you a couple of other questions. What is in the future, really quick, for you? Do you have another series lined up? Another book coming out?
Kind of a pitching series. I mean, it's what I do. But really, for me, I mean, I'm finishing. I wrote UFO Hunters Book 2. That came out a few months ago in November. That's on the book stands now. And it really is the TV companion to the series, first season. I'm wrapping up UFO Hunters Book 2. That was Book 1. I'm finishing Book 2 now. In fact, I'm doing the Dulcie story now in Book 2. That's the final chapter. That's coming out next year. I've got a book coming out in a few months called Hearts of Darkness, which is the other side of my career, which is writing books about psychological underpinnings of true crime. And that's what brought me into the Corso story in the first place.
Right.
Was I was a true crime writer. And so that book, Hearts of Darkness, is coming out in early May. And that's about the Sandy Hook shooting, the Aurora, Colorado shooting, stuff like that. It's a psychological perspective on why these mass murders are now occurring in epidemic proportions. Who are these people that are doing this, and what we can do about it as a country?
No movies?
I've got 3 movies under development right now. The Downing of TWA Flight 800. Okay, that's been optioned for a movie with Jim Sanders. I've got Space Wars, which I wrote with Bill Scott and Mike Kamados about wargaming in the Pentagon and when wargaming gets real. That's under option. And then the other option is for a book that I published. I published it 14 years ago. And it's been in and out of option for 14 years. It's the book is called Life in the Balance. It's by Billy Sinclair. It's about the guy who was in prison, who became a jailhouse lawyer, who wrote this mini brief that became part of the major Supreme Court brief that overthrew the death penalty in the United States in the 1970s, and how the government went to him to integrate the prison. He was on death row, to integrate the prison at Angola, and how at the end of the day, this guy was personally responsible for setting up a sting of pardons for sale against Governor Ed Edwards, who just got out of jail, is running for Congress again. And it's that story about Life in the Balance. So those are my 3 movies.
And really quick, just tell us about Future Theater. This is it's a DMR in our audience, but maybe they haven't heard it yet. So what is Future Theater?
Future Theater is a show that Nancy and I have. It's our radio show, been on for a few years now. And we basically do things. We're not confined to UFOs. So folks think that it's a UFO show. It's not. We go to places. I like to say that we go where no show has gone before, doing these really oddball kinds of guests, talking about really oddball kinds of things. We've had Billy Sinclair on, who wrote Life in the Balance. I've had Jim Sanders on a number of times. I've had my writing partner, Rick Lertzman, on talking about my book, which I think is going to do well. It's been out now since earlier this year, Dr. Feelgood, The Untold Story of J.F. Kennedy, Methamphetamines, Sam Giancana, and why the president, one of the reasons behind the Kennedy assassination, but it's about this doctor, Max Jacobson, who got the entire entertainment industry in Hollywood addicted to methamphetamines back in the 1950s and 60s.
Oh, man.
Dr. Feelgood, great book.
Oh, okay. Now, this is what I want you to do. We're going to roll out together, okay? Sound good?
Okay.
Okay. I'm just going to get the music going here. Let's see here. Hold on. Let me cue it up, and then we will just actually roll out together, and we will say goodnight together. How's that?
That works for me.
Okay. Here we go. This has been Fade to Black, Bill and Nancy Birnes. Thank you guys for coming in tonight. Stay tuned.
It was our pleasure.
Thank you. Coming up next, Spooky South Coast with Tim Weisberg. Special thanks to Keith Rowland. Fade to Black executive producer is Rita Kumirian. Show is produced by Hilton J. Palm. The announcers are Steve Harder and Mark D. Kovar. Music is produced by Doug Aldridge. Produced by Mark D. Kovar. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR and the Dark Matter Radio Network. See everybody tomorrow night. Clifford Stone. What do you think about that, Bill? Clifford Stone tomorrow night.
Clifford Stone is fabulous. Ask Clifford Stone about all the ghostly apparitions he's seen.
And you know what's funny? My music just died. So you know what? We get to talk for 25 more seconds. Keith, I'll wait for your countdown here. My music just died.
Clifford Stone Clifford Stone's a wonderful guest. Ask Clifford Stone about the Marilyn Monroe memo.
Yes.
Ask Clifford Stone about his work in nuclear biological chemical retrievals, and be sure to ask Clifford Stone about UFOs in Vietnam.
I absolutely will. And you know, I want you to almost sing a song with me. We have 5 seconds. See you, okay. Gracie. Hey, Bill, tell Nancy thank you. I really appreciate it, and you guys were a lot of fun. And if we can pull it off, let's do this next Thursday, and we'll get you guys back in. We'll do a part 2. Okay?
I'm all in.
You're all in.
Okay. Good night,
Thank you.
everybody.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.